thì bắt đầu bây giờ phải hỏi mọi người kỹ thuật kỹ thiết xong hết chưa để tôi tắt cái điện thoại thương kêu nào. Thế là bộ phận kỹ thuật đã ổn được chưa ạ?
Chuẩn bị xong rồi đấy.
Chuẩn bị xong rồi gì ạ? Vâng, thế kỹ thuật xong rồi thì là
hết chưa Hà ơi?
Hết rồi. Thì cứ bắt đầu với
cô Trâm Anh ơi, hoặc là chú Thịnh, ai là người điều khiển cái presentation đấy? Tại vì bạn Melissa bên cháu á, bạn ấy hỏi là có cái lúc mà bạn ấy present thì có cái gì để chuyển slide ạ?
Present chuyển slide á, thì chắc là phía bên Thịnh sẽ chuyển, phía bên VNCVC sẽ chuyển quyền. Một là có hai cách, một là cách là chuyển quyền thì bạn ấy nhận quyền, còn không thì bạn nhờ bên đấy chuyển, thì sau mỗi một slide bạn cứ nói next thì bên kia sẽ chuyển. Thì đấy là tùy, có cái chuyển quyền nó có cái dòng màu vàng phía trên ấy, thì nếu muốn nhận quyền thì mình bấm vào màn hình là mình nhận quyền. Thế còn nếu mình không muốn nhận cái quyền đấy thì bên kia họ sẽ chuyển cho mình, thì cứ mỗi một lần nói thì cứ nói là next thì bạn bên kia các bạn sẽ chuyển slide nhá. Đấy thì
bộ phận kỹ thuật bên này sẽ chuyển quyền cho chị Melissa trong quá trình trình bày.
Sao mình vẫn nghe được các thứ nhỉ? Hay là mình chưa tắt cái này? Tức là mình vẫn nghe được các thứ. Tích lên hay tích sao mình chẳng nghe được cái gì chứ nhỉ? Được chưa? Alo mọi người có nghe rõ không ạ?
Nghe rõ.
Vâng, thế thôi có lẽ là đã đến giờ thì chúng ta bắt đầu hội thảo ạ. Vâng, kính thưa các quý vị đại biểu, xin chào mừng các quý vị đã quay trở lại buổi tập huấn thứ 2 trong chuỗi hoạt động tập huấn về hiệu quả tài nguyên và sản xuất sạch hơn và cộng sinh công nghiệp trong cái chuỗi hoạt động của dự án triển khai sáng kiến khu công nghiệp sinh thái tại Việt Nam theo hướng tiếp cận mô hình khu công nghiệp sinh thái toàn cầu. Dự án do UNIDO và Bộ Kế hoạch Đầu tư thực hiện với sự tài trợ của Cục Kinh tế Liên bang Thụy Sĩ SECO. Thế thì ngày hôm qua chúng ta đã có một buổi tập huấn với sự tham gia của 25 doanh nghiệp tại khu công nghiệp Đình Vũ Hải Phòng, rồi là của Ban Quản lý Khu Kinh tế Hải Phòng, Công ty Hạ tầng Khu công nghiệp Đình Vũ, rồi các chuyên gia trong nước và quốc tế, và các cái tổ chức quốc tế cũng như là các viện nghiên cứu, một số viện nghiên cứu và trường đại học. Thì trước khi bắt đầu buổi hội thảo ngày hôm nay thì chúng tôi ban tổ chức cũng rất là xin được trân trọng cảm ơn Ban Quản lý Khu Kinh tế Hải Phòng cũng như Công ty Hạ tầng Khu công nghiệp Đình Vũ Deepsea đã hỗ trợ chúng tôi rất nhiều. Quý vị cũng đã biết là trong cái điều kiện dịch bệnh hiện nay thì rất là khó để liên hệ với các công ty rồi mời các bên liên quan tham gia, nhưng mà công ty Hạ tầng Khu công nghiệp Đình Vũ đã hỗ trợ ban tổ chức rất nhiều trong việc liên hệ các doanh nghiệp tham gia vào hội thảo ngày hôm nay. Cho nên là nhân cái buổi ngày hôm nay thì chúng tôi xin được bày tỏ sự cảm ơn đối với Ban Quản lý Hạ tầng khu kinh tế Ban Quản lý Khu Kinh tế Hải Phòng cũng như Công ty Hạ tầng Khu công nghiệp Đình Vũ. Thế thì ngày hôm qua chúng ta đã được lắng nghe một số cái nội dung quan trọng đã được trình bày, bao gồm cái khung quốc tế về khu công nghiệp sinh thái, rồi đánh giá các cái cơ hội chuyển đổi khu công nghiệp sinh thái của một số các khu công nghiệp tại Việt Nam, cũng như là đã lắng nghe các cái bài trình bày của các diễn giả về hiệu quả tài nguyên sản xuất sạch hơn, bao gồm cả phần lý thuyết, phần đưa ra những cái ví dụ điển hình cũng như là các bài tập thực hành. Và chúng ta cũng thấy là có rất là nhiều các cái tương tác, các cái trao đổi giữa diễn giả với những người tham dự, và qua các cái tương tác đấy thì chúng ta nhận thấy là tất cả các bên đều thể hiện một cái mối quan tâm chung rất lớn cho cái việc chuyển đổi các khu công nghiệp hiện tại sang cái mô hình khu công nghiệp sinh thái. Và đồng thời thông qua các cái trao đổi rồi các bài trình bày thì chúng ta cũng nhận thấy một điều, đó là để hỗ trợ cho việc chuyển đổi sang mô hình khu công nghiệp sinh thái thì cái vai trò của công ty hạ tầng ở khu công nghiệp là rất là quan trọng. Chính vì vậy mà để bắt đầu chương trình ngày hôm nay thì chúng ta sẽ lắng nghe cái phát biểu của công ty hạ tầng khu công nghiệp Đình Vũ, xem là công ty đã có những cái định hướng như thế nào trong việc hỗ trợ chuyển đổi sang khu công nghiệp sinh thái. Tôi xin được trân trọng giới thiệu bà Melissa Slababet, phụ trách về chất lượng, sức khỏe, an toàn, môi trường và phát triển bền vững của công ty hạ tầng khu công nghiệp Đình Vũ phát biểu. Xin trân trọng kính mời bà. Thank you for the introduction, Chamang. Good afternoon, everyone. I hope you can hear me clearly, also in Vietnamese. I will stop between some explanations to give the translators the time to translate what I am saying, because they don't know in advance what I will be talking about. Thank you for your understanding. I would like to thank you all to join these workshops. It's very important for Deepsea to have the cooperation of their tenants in the journey to become an eco-industrial park. I will quickly go through the general information of Deepsea. I will highlight some information about the symbiosis between industrial developments and the environment that Deepsea is already doing. And then I want to give some more information about how we see the transformation to an eco-industrial park. Currently, Deepsea industrial zones contains 5 zones. One of them is in full operation, which is Dinh Phu. Then we have Deepsea 2, which is under development, but already many tenants have joined us there, and the site is looking very good, and the operations have started there so far. Then we have 3 industrial zones which are currently under development, which is Deepsea 3 in Cat Hai, and our 2 industrial zones, Deepsea Russia, Dien Phong, and BTPIZ, Bac Chim Phong. The eco-industrial park transformation will focus mainly on the industrial zones which are operational at this moment, which means it will include Deepsea 1 and Deepsea 2. It is very important that we think about the sustainable development goals. In our daily operations in Deepsea, we always try to implement the sustainability goals into the daily operations. By becoming an eco-industrial park, we will focus on some of the sustainable development goals a little bit more. We cannot focus on all of them, but some of them will be highlighted and will be a focus in the transformation to the eco-industrial park. I want to show some initiatives that Deepsea is taking at this moment, and some which we have in mind and we would like to work towards too. We are currently focusing a lot on renewable energy, because by 2030, it's our goal to supply 50% of Deepsea's electricity demand by renewable energy. How do we want to achieve this? We focus on solar and wind generation. We have some rooftop solar projects implemented already on the warehouse. And we have some tenants with who we are negotiating to have a cooperation to install rooftop solar. We also have a plan to install some ground solar projects. We have a wind turbine, which we try to install in Deepsea 2, which will also generate renewable energy, which will be used to supply to our tenants. Some other topics that might come up is waste to energy, and also storage of renewable energy will become more and more important in the future. In this picture, you can see our rooftop solar project on the warehouses of Deepsea.
water is a very important resource, and it will become more and more important in the future. That's why it's a main target to reduce the water usage. As we are an industrial zone in development, it's hard to reduce the total amount of water we are using. So we prefer to use the units of cubic meter of water per developed hectare. So we can see how many water we use on our daily basis and try to reduce it if possible. What we also aim to do is reuse our treated wastewater. We already take some actions for this. Some of the treated wastewater is reused to water the nursery and the green areas of Deepsea. What we would love to do, and this is a bit a start to industrial symbiosis, is we would love to have this water reused by one of our tenants. The quality is good, so it would be a very good opportunity if we can reuse the treated wastewater back in one of the tenants' processes. This is a wastewater treatment plant in Dinfu, currently fully operational for 6,000 cubic meter per day. What we also try to do is change our mindsets. We want to increase our waste recycling. We want to reduce our emissions in the daily operations we do. I think most of you have heard about the plastic road we installed, the first phase, 200 meter in Deepsea 2. This is a cooperation between Dow, the chemical company, and our main goal there is to really make this one of the Vietnam standards. We are working together with Dow and the authorities to get this as a Vietnamese standard. Another project we have, it's now also with Dow, but we use now waterborne paint for the road paintings. These paints have less emissions, they are non-toxic, and their application is actually as good as the other one, but it uses much less energy for the application. Also, the natural environment is very important. What we used to do was actually reclaim the land, and then we start implementing green areas. What we would like to do, and what we already started doing more and more, is enhance the native fauna and flora. We want to use what is available in Vietnam. We want to reuse the fauna and flora that is available on the location where we implement green zones. In our zones in Quang Ninh, for example, we have some mangroves in the industrial zone. We want to preserve these mangroves. We want to set up a plan so we can keep part of the mangroves inside our industrial zone. We also installed a Wetland Park in Deepsea 2. If you see it from the air, it starts to look great, and it will look great in the future. You will see some pictures on the next slide. This is a wetland park where we really try to use native flora. Also, we will use vetiver grass on some floating beds to slightly treat the rainwater coming in the wetlands. Another project we are currently working on is the Deepsea farm, where we want to grow vegetables and fruits, harvest them, and distribute them among the workers of Deepsea. In our dream, it's something we can really develop to even work together with the tenants, that we are able to distribute these packages of fruit and vegetables to many of the workers who might have a lower income. This way, we want to try to support them as much as possible. Here you can see part of the wetland area. So this is actually a wetland park we will implement in Deepsea 2. Transformation into an eco-industrial park. Luckily, we get the help of UNIDO, SECO, and MPI in this, because it's a long journey, and we need help also in this, also from the tenants. We need to work on this together, and your cooperation is highly appreciated. It will bring a big added value for the environment. Also economically, it can bring advantages. What do we need to focus on? It's more on the circular economy. It's those industrial symbiosis. The industrial symbiosis, for sure, we need the help of the tenants. We need to understand your processes. We need to know what goes in, what comes out. And based on this, we can investigate if we can set up a cooperation between some customers so the waste of one can become a new resource for the other. This also brings me to the resource efficiency and cleaner production, which has been highlighted a lot in the session of yesterday. And in general, I think sustainable development need to come highly on our agendas. I think I have one more slide. And this is one to encourage you all to join us in the journey to become an eco-industrial park. Dick yesterday also highlighted that it's not something we can do tomorrow, also not next week. It's a journey. It will be a process of continuous improvement, and we need to work together on this. So I want to actually encourage and bring enthusiasm to our tenants to join Deepsea in this beautiful story. I hope you will enjoy the session of today, and if you have any question, you can always reach out to us. Thank you so much.
Vâng, xin cảm ơn bà Melissa, và thông qua bài trình bày của bà Melissa thì chúng ta thấy là rõ ràng là khu công nghiệp Đình Vũ, Deepsea đã có những cái sự chuẩn bị ngay từ đầu cho việc chuyển đổi sang khu công nghiệp sinh thái, thông qua việc là hình thành những cộng sinh, những cái kết nối về cộng sinh công nghiệp, rồi là thông qua việc kế hoạch tái sử dụng nước, rồi là cái quan trọng là thay đổi tư duy của các bên liên quan, và thậm chí là có những cái khu mà Deepsea còn dự kiến là sẽ bảo tồn cái khu đất ngập nước là Wetland, là bảo tồn cái khu đất ngập nước để bảo tồn cái hiện trạng tự nhiên. Thì đấy là một trong những cái mà những cái điểm rất là đáng khích lệ ở trong cái định hướng phát triển của khu công nghiệp Đình Vũ. Và chúng tôi cũng rất là hy vọng là thông qua việc hợp tác với dự án này, với sự hỗ trợ của Bộ Kế hoạch Đầu tư và UNIDO cũng như là của SECO, thì dự án cũng có thể như là một cái cú hích để giúp khu công nghiệp Đình Vũ cùng phát triển theo một cái hướng sinh thái. Và cũng như bà Melissa đã nói đấy, đây là một quá trình rất là dài và chúng ta sẽ phải đồng hành với nhau, không thể là ngày 1 ngày 2 mà sẽ là trên một con đường dài, nhưng mà chúng ta sẽ tiến đến việc sinh thái, chuyển đổi các cái khu công nghiệp sang sinh thái hơn, bền vững hơn, và chúng ta cùng nhau bước tiếp ạ. Và bây giờ thì chúng ta sẽ quay vào cái chương trình chính của ngày hôm nay. Để bắt đầu chương trình ngày hôm nay thì tôi xin mời ông Dick Van Ber, ông sẽ tổng hợp lại các cái kết quả của buổi 1 ngày hôm qua, và sau đó thì chúng ta sẽ bước tiếp vào cái buổi ngày hôm nay ạ. Xin mời ông Dick Van Ber.
Thank you very much, Tham Ang. And first of all, I would like to say thank you and acknowledgement also the efforts of Deepsea, because I think the key messages are very clear, and this will even become clearer in the presentation today. So it's really creating enthusiasm and understanding that eco-industrial park is a business-driven approach which can deliver benefits to the industrial park, to the tenant companies, to the government agencies, and the local communities. So it's all about working together. I think that's a key message from yesterday. Even if you do a resource efficiency assessment, it's for companies to work together with the VNCPC, the Cleaner Production Center, with park management, but also with financial institutions in terms of access to finance. So it's really this journey that we are on together. And the session that we had last week and yesterday, and through the Global Eco-Industrial Parks Program, this will continue for the next years to come. So let's work together and see where there's common ground and where are the opportunities where we can create an impact in the next 2 to 3 years, step by step. I think that's another key point. And also, I would like to, in the presentation today on industrial synergies, we also use the Kwinana industry area as a case study. And I think there are a number of parallels in the journey that the Kwinana industry area has taken with the Deepsea in terms of the transformation into eco-industrial park, getting the companies on board, pushing these industrial synergies. So I think that's, I would like to highlight this as well, but this will become clear in the next session as well, which I will be doing together with Ankit. So if there's one keyword, collaborate for a better industrial park, which will benefit all of us. And it's a very multidisciplinary field, but pick out the things which are relevant for you as a tenant company, for park management, for government agencies. I think there's important items for all of you somewhere. I think that's my recap, and also looking forward to the session today. But maybe I can look at also Ankit or the Cleaner Production Center if there are any other important messages from yesterday.
Thank you, Dick. I think that very well summarizes. I must thank Traman for the introduction and setting the scene this morning. Melissa, especially, as Dick said, very important to have, not just the administration, but the tenants equally participative. And you draw a very fine, underline on that message. And we would like to elaborate a bit more during our session today. So this collaboration, rightly as Dick said, is where we will be able to work closely with Deepsea to get these industrial symbiosis, RECP, and the EIP into action. So we look forward to more collaboration on that. Does VNCPC have any message, or should we move on with the agenda then?
Xin cảm ơn ông anh Ankit. Thì chắc là trước khi có cái bài trình bày của ông Kết thì chúng tôi nhận được một cái câu hỏi liên quan đến khu công nghiệp Deepsea của ông Đỗ Quang Huy từ phía Cục Kinh tế Liên bang Thụy Sĩ SECO. Tức là câu hỏi này thì tôi nghĩ là cũng xin mời bà Meleza thì trả lời luôn.
Trước khi phía VNCPC và anh Ankit trình bày về phần cộng sinh công nghiệp thì tôi có nhìn thấy một cái câu hỏi cho chị Melissa. Thì tôi xin được phép là tranh thủ lúc phía VNCPC đang chuẩn bị nói thì nhờ chị Melissa trả lời luôn. Câu hỏi của anh Huy từ SECO đó là chị Melissa có thể cho biết là các cái mối liên quan với cộng đồng hiện nay là như thế nào? Trong cái mô hình khu công nghiệp của chị thì nêu rõ hơn về những cái mối liên hệ với cái cộng đồng là như thế nào, bởi vì như chúng ta biết trong cái khu công nghiệp sinh thái thì có một cái phần rất là quan trọng, đó là phần có cái tương tác với cộng đồng. Thì ở đây là khu công nghiệp mình có, theo tôi hiểu anh Huy muốn hỏi là có những cái hoạt động như thế nào, hay là có cái định hướng như thế nào trong các cái tương tác đối với cộng đồng và mang lại cho cộng đồng các cái lợi ích.
Yes. As Deepsea, we have some under development. Okay.
Như có cái mic của ai đó trong phần em nghe thấy.
Good. So as Deepsea, we always try to be close to the communities. In some of our industrial zones, there are even villages inside the industrial zone. We also try to support local initiatives. We try to hire also hire workers from the community close to our industrial zone, and also like the Deepsea Farm project. This is a project we are setting up in close cooperation with some local farmers. So we are currently working to include the local communities much more in the daily operations of Deepsea. We also have a few projects. I don't know if I can tell a lot about it because it's still very preliminary. But also checking with schools if we can set up some cooperations to school the students more in line with the industries that we are attracting currently. I hope this answers your question.
Yes, thank you very much, Melissa. It's a very interesting information, and we would like to see how an industrial park can be further developed in Vietnam with the strong connection with the communities. And we're also thinking about like the industrial park and urban symbiosis, and that is could be a starting point for the projects to consider as well beyond the project duration. Thank you.
Can I take this opportunity to also answer another question that has been posted? The question is that we have the goal to reuse 20% of our treated wastewater by 2022. And if we have any legal issue with this, yes, we have. Currently, according to the regulations, we cannot sell the water back to one of our tenants. This is something we need to investigate further, and we need to come up with a proposal to show that this industrial symbiosis has an added value and need to get approval for this project.
With this, any more questions? Shall we start with the industrial synergies session? Tom Ang?
Vâng, như vậy là chúng ta thấy là phần câu hỏi cho chị Melissa là hết rồi ạ. Thì bây giờ chúng ta lại quay lại phía đầu cầu phía anh Chùa Anh Thịnh, VNCPC và anh Ankit ạ. Xin mời các anh tiếp tục về phần cộng sinh công nghiệp.
Sure. Thank you, Traman. Thank you, Dick. Thank you, Melissa, once again. Good afternoon to everyone in Vietnam. Good morning to colleagues from Europe as well. We want to talk in this session about industrial symbiosis. And over the next couple of hours, or just a little under, we are running a little late. We want to talk about the key concepts and tools, which we'll start with. Then we want to spend more time, as much as we can, on some practical examples and case studies, because that will be more interesting for you. As companies, you will find more interesting examples to hear from there. And then finally, we would like to give some time for interaction, questions and answers, and so on. Please remember, this has to be interactive. Feel free to raise your hand or ask a question, or put it in the chat box if you have any urgent burning points over here. But let's start with this topic of industrial symbiosis or industrial synergy, both used interchangeably. We talked about RECP yesterday, and this is the other arm of it. So moving on to the next slide, the first slide, an introduction. So generally speaking, in nature, when we use the word symbiosis or synergy, this is defined as a relationship between individuals or different species where both the individuals or the species benefit from each other. And this symbiotic exchange among different entities, they have a benefit. And the collective benefit. So you have one finger, which has enough effort, but when you have 5, they come together, and the collective benefit is that of a hand or a fist. And when you take this in an industry setting or industrial setting, that becomes like industrial symbiosis or industrial synergy. It is an approach, as the slide says, that brings together companies or industries from different sectors with the overall aim of improving cross-industry resource efficiency. For those of you who were there yesterday, I mentioned how, when you do it within a company, it becomes resource efficiency. When you do it within an industrial setting between different companies, it becomes an industrial symbiosis. Through the commercial trading of different items, they could be materials, energy or resources or water, assets that you may have, logistics, services, expertise. And the primary aim is to maximize the resource conservation and reduce your emissions through better sustainable management of your waste, your byproducts between your companies, between different industries. And synergies between these companies, as again Melissa mentioned earlier, allow for socially, environmentally, and economically viable supply chain. They are the 3 very important aspects of this. So over the course of the session, we'll look a little bit more into this. On to the next slide, please, Dick. So industrial symbiosis is interlinked, as you may all be aware, with the concept of industrial ecology. It is an innovative way to increase productivity, become more resource efficient, and it is considered to be one of the very primary approaches to realize a circular economy. This is a buzzword we've been looking about and hearing about over us. Green growth or industrial growth linked to sustainability is another keyword that you hear these days, and industrial symbiosis helps you do that. How would one define industrial symbiosis? And there are a couple of definitions over here. It is known as the associations between industrial units or facilities in which waste or byproduct of one becomes raw material of another, as is represented in a diagram next to this text. It can be described as collaboration between several different, often geographically proximate entities. It's probably better if they are as close to each other, because then it's easier to transfer these synergies. So whether they are in clusters or within an industrial park, to exchange resources that can be used as a substitute. And this is often described as industrial symbiosis. So moving on to the next slide, please, Dick. Let's look at, how RECP that we looked about yesterday yesterday, cleaner production, resource efficiency, as well as industrial synergies or industrial symbiosis are complementary approaches. They have overlaps, but they help each other. So RECP, as I mentioned earlier, is on an individual company basis as a primary focus. Industrial symbiosis is for multiple companies to come together to form these resource efficiency and cleaner production measures. But overall, for both of them, they help improve economic, environmental, and social performance and increase the resource efficiency of the industrial park as a whole, of the companies individually, and the clusters as well. So that is what industrial symbiosis or synergy is. The next slide talks to us a bit more about the different types of industrial synergies. And it's important for each of you to understand, industrial synergy could be extremely complex or quite simple. It could be a simple dialogue you can have with a company you know well to identify what waste you might have. And when I say waste, it is not physical waste. It may not be solid waste. As I said yesterday, it can be your wastewater. It can be waste of energy or steam or a fertilizer or a compost. And how that could be primary material, raw material, or an additive for the company. So there are a number of types of these synergies, and a few of them are listed over here. Utility synergies and infrastructure sharing is one where companies share use of utility infrastructure, mainly revolving around water and energy. For example, water recovery, energy cogeneration. Then there is the supply synergy and co-location of suppliers and clients. So as the name indicates, where clustering of companies in the supply and value chain is done. For example, producers and suppliers of raw materials, fabricators, manufacturing, business clients, and so on. When they are in the same location, then this becomes a supply synergy or a co-location of supplier and client. Then you have your byproduct synergy and waste exchanges. So this is the use of previously disposed byproduct. A company might have a main product, but several byproducts, or even just one. And the use of a previously disposed byproduct, one that has little or no use in solid, liquid, or gas form. And often a byproduct may not be cushion covers out of a large garment factory. A byproduct could just be, shredded textile waste to make into, to basically be thrown away. They can be, in a solid, liquid, gas form. So think about anything that is not currently used, might even be waste, which can be a byproduct from one facility to another. Then you have your service synergies in the green box at the bottom, where sharing of services and activities between industries in an industrial area, for example, joint training of staff, sharing of maintenance contractors, or even maybe a shared ISP, internet service provider, as simple as that. And then finally, last and not the least, will be the urban industrial synergies, where you are talking about your industrial setting and industrial park, as well as the urban or the rural area around it, interlinkages and collaboration between these companies, these parks, as well as the local cities and municipalities for collection, for processing, for reusing, for local community development, for job creation, waste management, and so on. So on that note, on the next slide, we will take a look a little bit more into what urban industrial synergies are. The box on, the dotted box on the left looks at resource efficiency, where it is done at a company scale. The blue box is more about industrial synergies, where a cluster of companies come together. And when these synergies are extended a little wider, so that there are reduced inputs, as you can see on the top, of energy, of waste, of transport and logistics, of fuel, of carbon emissions, as well as reduced outputs, in the sense, of course, not your final product, but reduced waste and reduced wastewater and reduced emissions. This falls as an overall concept of urban industrial synergies. And later on today, my colleague Dick will talk about some very interesting examples that are seen in an urban industrial symbiosis as well. So let's look at what the benefits and drivers are. If we can move on, Dick, thank you very much. So industrial symbiosis has a number of economical, social, as well as environmental benefits. And of course, money talks. It's important to have the economical benefits. Importantly, for companies to remain motivated, there are quite a few benefits for all the stakeholders involved in industrial symbiosis. For example, it helps increase profitability. This could be done by reduction of raw material, by reducing the cost for waste disposal, by becoming more efficient in energy use and hence reducing the energy cost or wastewater disposal cost, but also generation of new revenues from residues by selling of byproducts and so on. It also allows for higher competitiveness or increasing the competitiveness of each company by opening up new business opportunities. We have worked with companies who have become more fit to supply, as they call it, by becoming greener or by ensuring there were more symbiosis over there, creating a strong environmental profile by diverting waste from landfill, reducing carbon emissions, reducing dependency on resources, and thus becoming a very strong contender, a very sustainable company overall. And then as Melissa again mentioned earlier, the sustainable development goals, these become more and more important as we move along for nations as a whole. Vietnam, I understand, has a few tens of billions worth of an SDG market over the next 10 to 15 years. About 42 US billion dollars are estimated as the SDG market for Vietnam. But then also at an industrial park level and a company level, it allows each of you to meet the sustainable development goals. So a couple of case studies on this slide. Apologies about the very small diagram on the right. There will be, an expanded diagram for this a little later on. But let's take a look at this example from Kalundborg in Denmark, which has operated as a park since the 1970s and is often known as the first working industrial symbiosis in the world, or one of the earliest one. The primary stakeholders in Kalundborg include an oil refinery, a power station, a gypsum board facility or a company, a pharmaceutical company. They share groundwater, surface water, wastewater, steam, fuel, and also exchange a variety of byproducts, as you can see, with this intricate diagram on the right. That becomes, these byproducts have often become feedstock in other processes. And the benefits of the industrial symbiosis include reduced energy use by, many, many tons. The CO2 reduction is estimated and has been calculated at about 250,000 tons a year, a 30% reduction in the use of water, as well as minimize waste for disposal. There is also an example of the benefit of industrial symbiosis from the National Industrial Symbiosis Program in the UK, where over a course of 7 years, a total cost savings of about 1.3 billion euros were recorded, and an additional sale from those beneficiary companies of the same amount, plus a huge amount of reduction of CO2. So essentially, industrial symbiosis can provide an important competitive advantage for traditional large-scale, medium-scale companies, but also the smaller ones that have been, more so in recent times affected by the economic downturn. This is a great opportunity to integrate industrial symbiosis as an integral part of your business development. Collectively, engaging industries and companies has added values in terms of knowledge creation, knowledge exchange through symbiotic networks. So it's important to take a look into this. But then it's not easy to do so. There are challenges which we'll take a look at the following slide. Quite a few of these. There is, of course, lack of time and resources. It is not easy to implement. How do you identify? First of all, identifying a large number of these, then identifying and shortlisting the crucial ones, then finding, the technical feasibility, the financial feasibility, and then implementing it. It's not the most easy thing to do, but if you look at the cost and benefits of it, it could be very beneficial. There could be lack of expertise in the region. You may not have someone who can really identify this whole thing, but there could also be low awareness. I think the last one is not so much an issue for Deepsea anymore. There has been, an increasing number of these activities already being happening at Deepsea, and we hope these kind of capacity building workshops and interactions with our colleagues at VNCPC are going to at least spread higher awareness. How does one overcome these challenges? And one very clear way of doing this, as we've experienced from around the world, is through a presence of a cluster, a network, or a coordinating body who can facilitate such collaboration to help organize exchange between the companies. And with the Deepsea Park management being so proactive, I think there is a great opportunity for the tenants to use this platform to discuss more proactively the industrial symbiosis opportunity. We would like to look at a few practical examples in a minute, but before we go there and I pass the floor to my colleague Dick Van Beers, I would like all of you to take an opportunity to open up your microphone and talk to us about you as companies. What would be your main driver? What would be your main incentive? Why would you implement industrial symbiosis? And what would be your biggest challenge? If you can, open up your mic, share it with us, or if you can at least, put that in the chat box, that'll be very useful. Thank you.
Thank you, Ankit. And while everybody is thinking of the key challenge and incentives, there's a question in the chat box, and I want to mention this in any case. Of this presentation, it's available both in English and in Vietnamese. And we're sharing it in Vietnamese on the screen because most of the participants are Vietnamese. But we can share it even shortly after the training or even during the training. The PDF file, this could also be done if it's helpful. So everything will be shared, what you see today and also yesterday. So bear that in mind. With this, over to you, Ankit.
Thank you, Dick. And yes, I once again invite everyone, the tenants from Deepsea, colleagues who are present here today, to, in as few words as you want, tell us about what your incentives are and what your challenges are in industrial symbiosis, or even let us know if this is something you have not considered at all so far, but would be willing to consider, because it's important to have very strong participation. And maybe if no one does, I don't know if Melissa, you have come across any particular challenges on behalf of the companies for industrial symbiosis that you may want to share today?
Yes, one pops up in my mind, and it's the legal definition of waste, actually. Because in Vietnam, there are a lot of regulations related to waste, and especially related to the transportation of waste. So I'm wondering if this might be a problem if we think towards industrial symbiosis, because if we think about industrial symbiosis, we don't see it as waste. Yeah, we see it as an output of one company that will be used as an input or a resource for another company. But sometimes I fear that according to the Vietnamese law, it will still be considered as waste. How can we deal with this?
Thank you very much, Melissa, for this. Maybe, Dick, I can hand over to you in a minute, but quickly sharing a couple of very complementary, very opposite, but very hand-in-hand experiences in the UK when I had done some work with companies over here on industrial symbiosis. In the UK, as if you classify anything as waste, as is also in Europe, you need a waste carrier's license. So in order to carry it, you need a waste carrier's license, and it cannot just be exchanged from one company to another. in which case, increasingly, the companies stopped registering those products as waste. They were not thrown off in the bin anymore. They were not classified as waste. They were put in separate containers, marked as, even in all their project or their company documentation, marked as a byproduct. And then sent out as a company byproduct to someone else, and that could immediately bypass without doing anything illegal that particular loophole. So that is first of all a change of mindset. The stark opposite is when last year in India we set up India's very first photovoltaic recycling pilot facility, and in that sense, end of life panels. When we tried to transport it, they were still classified as panels because this is not there's no one identifies this as waste stream in India yet. And it took us a lot of efforts to approach different environment bodies to explain this classified as waste in order to transfer it at no additional duties across the different states. So a little bit of this could also be coordination with the environment agencies to identify what could and could not be, depending on the situation, be considered as waste. But maybe Dick, from your experiences, you might have anything to add to that as well.
Yeah, like it's typical for many countries. As you said, in the UK, they have this guidance note. If a byproduct meets certain criteria, it's much easier to reuse. But for example, in Australia, it's exactly the same challenge where a byproduct is classified as a waste. And then, of course, there are different waste classifications. And by this classification, actually puts restrictions and also additional monitoring requirements and extensive approval processes as well. And this is a learning from Australia. And here, and I'm making the link to the next the case study as well, the Kwinana Industry Council, which is the park management of one of the largest industry area, is working very closely together with the state government and Department of Environment actually to update these legislation, which are a restriction to this industrial symbiosis in some cases. So this is a challenge in many countries, which have to be addressed again to this collaborative approach. So it's not only the private sector, the public sector has to come on board and see the benefits as well. And therefore also, as part of the Global Eco-Industrial Parks program, we also have these awareness raising sessions with the government agencies that they are aware of the economic, environmental, and also the social benefits of these synergies. So, but very good question. And this is something we could be done further work on in Vietnam as well. Okay, with this, I'm looking at my clock as well. I think it's great to have these interactions. So the more questions, the better. And everybody will get a copy of the presentation in any case. So we may skip some slides and we will just try to cater to your main interest areas. So with this, I would like to move, to a case study which we'll use quite extensively in this session. It's called the Kwinana Industrial Area in Western Australia. It's one of the largest industrial parks in Australia. It's on the west coast, about 30 kilometers south of Perth. It's about 1,200 hectares, so it's quite a large one. It was already established in the 1950s, direct employment to 4,000 people. And there's similar as in Deepsea, there's coexistence of a diverse set of industries. Of course, each industrial park is unique. So of course, Kwinana isn't Deepsea, but I think there are some similarities in here in terms of the journey as well, and the synergy potential and existing synergies. So Kwinana, it includes Alcoa Alumina Refinery, Nickel West Ore Refinery, but also a power station, waste to energy they just established, and I will show to you in a second. A water recycling facility as well. There's a cement plant. There are chemical factories, fertilizer facility. The Kwinana Industry Council acts as the park management entity for the Kwinana industry area. It's basically established in 1991. And it's basically a member-based business association. And their key role is to secure the long-term sustainability and facilitate these collaborations to ensure that Kwinana becomes a better industrial park, but also engage with, as I said, on the legislation, engage with the state government to upgrade legislation where possible. And the story of the park management is very interesting and links in with industrial synergies as well, because the park was established in the 1950s. In the initial decades, the park had a bit of a poorer reputation because often, if you look at this picture, it's located next to a sensitive marine environment, heavy industries, and also it's surrounded by local communities. So there was a bit of a tension in terms of air pollution or water, etc. In the early 90s, the industries were required to do their air and water quality monitoring around the boundaries of the industry area. And rather than each company doing it on their own, they said, let's establish this Kwinana Industry Council and actually do it collectively. So it's more efficient, more cost effective, a better way of doing things. And the key story there is that by doing this, the industries very quickly realized there are many, many things they can do more together in terms of creating a more sustainable and better industrial park in here. And this is also how the Kwinana industry area has become a world leading example of the implementation of these synergies, collaborations. Over 50 supply chain synergies, over 33 existing exchanges of byproducts, 15 utility synergies where companies exchange waste, heat, shared wastewater treatment, etc. So it's really a world-leading example. If you want more information, you can look at the references which I put in below. And also, there's an industry commitment. As also Melissa said, it's a process of continuous improvement. The Kwinana industry area is 80% developed, but even with the pressure for a circular economy, the SDG goals, there's a continuous commitment and also pressure on the industries to make the next step. So it doesn't stop now with Kwinana. They continuously look for new opportunities. And the key opportunity there is also around lithium processing. So the Kwinana Industry Council, if you go to their website, what you see on the homepage immediately, that they really promote these industrial synergies as an added value feature to attract new industries to the industry area. So it's an added value feature. And also these existing synergies, they secure the water supply to new tenant companies as well. Because as I said yesterday, the lack of access to competitively priced water for the next 20 years, definitely in Australia, is a potential showstopper for any new industries locating in there. So the Kwinana Industry Council is really addressing this issue. I will show you in the next example. But this, for example, one of the pictures we had with these opportunity identification workshops in Kwinana. And the reason I always use Kwinana as an example, because I used to work there for 5 years to actually work on their sustainability and industrial synergy. I'm not going through all examples because that will take me 5 hours, but I just want to give you a flavor of some of these examples and the learnings. So in terms of byproduct synergies, cement plants, they produce lime kiln dust as a byproduct, and it was previously stockpiles and landfills. But actually 2 other companies in Kwinana, they used, not anymore, virgin lime as a raw material to desulfurize their flue gases. So the synergy there is that actually these 2 companies, instead of using virgin lime, they use lime kiln dust to desulfurize their flue gases. So of course there's economic benefits because they get this lime kiln dust basically for free. There's an economic benefit to the cement plant because they have lower landfill costs, but also there's an environmental benefit because less virgin lime is actually mined and less lime kiln dust is actually landfilled. So it makes business sense. Each of the opportunity that we've shown in Kwinana is driven because it makes business sense. Yes, there are environmental benefits, but there are economic benefits, indirect benefits, one way or another. These synergies do not happen because they are just green. They make business sense, a key message. For utility synergies, and maybe I will highlight the water recycling facility because it was also highlighted by Melissa. I have some more details later on, but in Kwinana, together with the water corporation, which is the water utility companies, actually they have established this Kwinana water recycling facility. And what this facility does, it takes secondary treated water from a nearby municipal wastewater treatment plant. It pushes through reverse osmosis and microfiltration, and it produces fit for purpose industry feed water for the industries. Because as you can imagine, same for Deepsea, there are a number of water intensive industries located in Kwinana. And in Australia, the groundwater levels are going down. It gets more salty because of the seawater comes in. They cannot access more bore water. And there's also a lot of pressure for them not to use any more potable water. So this is really an initiative, the water recycling facility between park management, the tenant companies, because they are involved, they specify their needs, and the water utility company. And by having this facility, it secures the water for the next 20 years to come for the industries. And the price of water that they pay, it's only what I know, because it's also confidentiality issues, it's only 5 or 10% more expensive than potable water. But then you can say, well, it's more expensive, I don't buy it. But that's not the business case. The business case is actually by taking this water, they secure their operations, because if they don't have it, they cannot even operate. So this is a very, very good deal. With a slightly higher cost for water, they have access to water and they can expand their operations. It's a very strong business case. So very important to understand the business case is broader than just the price of the raw material or the resource. I can talk for hours about this example, but we just give you a flavor. Supply chain synergies. Air Liquide and BOC, I assume that they're also operating in Vietnam, but they are co-located next to a number of heavy processing companies in Kwinana, the oil refinery, the cement plant, to provide hydrogen, oxygen to the desired quality levels to the industry. So this is a co-location of a supplying company next to its main customer. But also service synergies. We have to have a broad mind when we talk about synergies. Yes, they often relate to water, energy, and byproducts. But also in terms of shared services, there are many opportunities as well. And one of them I already mentioned. This is this joint air or water quality monitoring facilitated by the Kwinana Industry Council. There are cost savings and it's more effective. And just working together, I have a question here in the chat box, BOC Gas. It's a name of a company in operating worldwide. Same as Air Liquide, BOC Gases is a name of a company. But also another example of service synergies is dialogue events, which are facilitated through the Kwinana Industry Council. So it's really every 2 months they organize a community forum. So when there has been an incident in Kwinana, whatever it is, or transport or in terms of waste, they discuss it in these forums. When a new industry is coming to Kwinana, they have to present to the government, but also to the community about their plans, like the waste to energy facility. Are these discussions always easy? No, they are not. But it's a very proactive way to engage with the community and tackle all these things up front. And actually, rather than doing it afterwards, which is even more costly. Again, it makes business sense. Very important. With this slide, next one, it just shows that the benefits of industrial synergies, they go beyond typical commercial benefits. I don't want to spend too much time on this. I highlighted a number of them. So for the reuse of the gypsum from a chemical company at Alcoa residue area, for soil amendment, yes, there are reduced costs to manage the gypsum and lower costs of the gypsum source to Alcoa, the aluminum refinery, but there are also these community and environmental benefits. And I highlighted this also for the water recycling facility as well. Commercial benefits, water security, availability of high-grade water for industry, but the environmental benefits, you have to extract less water from groundwater, conserve potable water and use that for the community rather than for industry use. This slide, I just have this as an example because this is actually an international development which we see in many, many countries. It's about this urban industrial synergies. And I think there are opportunities for Deepsea as well, or Vietnam overall. When I worked there in Kwinana, when we talked waste to energy, the first thing they said, this will never happen in Australia, in Western Australia. The community is against it. We have landfill sites. It's here. The legislation doesn't allow it. But now we are 10 years later on, and actually 2 waste to energy facilities are being built at the, one is being built, and the second one is actually in being developed. So this waste to energy facility, it actually processes up to 4,000 tons of municipal waste from nearby municipalities. It generates electricity, 36 megawatts, and provides jobs. It doesn't mean that all recyclables are going into this waste to energy facility, right? It's only the mixed municipal solid waste. But the key message from this slide, that industrial parks are very well placed to attract new industries which process resources from nearby cities. There are examples in South Africa as well, with a company called Character, which established a plastics recycling facility, collecting the waste plastics and produces actually new plastics out of it, and also oils and waxes. So I think what we see, these urban industrial synergies are rapidly increasing internationally, and these are business opportunities for tenant companies, but also for industrial parks. And of course, these urban industrial synergies, they might be different for Vietnam and Deepsea. And if you wish, Melissa, you can share maybe your perspectives on the potential for this in Deepsea. We welcome your views as well, or VNCPC. What do you see as the potential for these urban industrial synergies in Vietnam? Is there what do you see? Challenges, opportunities, or? No?
I see many opportunities for sure, and I agree that having a close relation with the community is important, and it's maybe something we can improve. Like I took note of your idea to inform everyone in advance about a new tenant that is coming up. Definitely, if you might think that this tenant has some impact on the traffic or on emissions, or that you can inform everyone in advance what is the plan, maybe already inform them about mitigation measures, of which actions have been taken, that we show that we've been thinking about this, and like you say, it's also good to avoid. It's better to avoid conflicts than to solve them afterwards. I think that's a great opportunity for the waste to energy, or for some specific projects in Kwinana. Yeah, we need more information about this. At this moment, we don't know our tenants good enough on this. We need input from our tenants to know more about their processes, to understand how their processes work, and to see how we can set up similar systems. I also took note about the shared services. Indeed, it sometimes it can be simple. Like you say, all of us do the monitoring, why not do it together? These are very good ideas that we will take into consideration.
Thank you, Melissa. And you're absolutely spot on. The community engagement, especially with the waste to energy, it's very critical. And this is also where you see that one synergy builds upon another one, because the existing synergy was that they have these 2 monthly meetings with the community, government, and the industries. Until 10 years ago, there was community resistance. They didn't really understand because the concept of waste to energy was new to Australia. In Europe, it's common practice, right? And through these community forums, actually, they worked their way through all of these issues. It took a long time. It didn't happen in 2 months' time, but step by step, it became clear. Also, a number of companies, they presented their technology to these forums, and they had this engagement. And Melissa, I could also, because I have good contacts with also the director of the Kwinana Industry Council, Chris Orton, because I feel there are many parallels between the Kwinana industry area and Deepsea and the journey. If you wish, and we can discuss it later, we can also organize a bilateral call with the director and maybe some of the industries in Kwinana to actually get the learnings from these community forums, waste to energies. They also have how they do this air and water quality monitoring. So this peer-to-peer learning, because of course, Ankit and myself, we tell the story, but often it's even more of interest to actually talk to another park manager to get these learnings. So this is what we always offer as part of these follow-up for this training. So, but I leave it with you and we can discuss it afterwards, but it's possible.
It can for sure be very interesting to learn from each other, because it like the industrial symbiosis. I have the impression that most of the times it's considered as something very technical and very complicated. But that's just the name that might sound like. There are many opportunities that are quite simple to set up, but it's just someone need to like punch you a little. Look, this is something you can do.
You're absolutely right. Yes, some industrial synergy when you talk about the waste, the water recycling facility. Of course, this took in Kwinana also 5 years. But the example, the synergy in terms of reusing lime kiln dust from the cement plant to desulfurize the flue gases from 2 companies, that if the companies see the opportunity, they talk to each other, they can then make it happen very quickly. So there's always this mix of low cost, very simple, but let's do, I would always say, well, let's do both of them in parallel, but also don't try to do everything in 2 years because it's too much as well.
I also see a question in the chat, which I think is quite good to think about. Kwinana and Deepsea have the are lucky to have many different kinds of tenants. So it will be possible to maybe find some waste of one company that might be a resource for the other company. But what with industrial parks that focus on one technology, one sector?
Very good points. And of course, as you say, it is sometimes an advantage that there's diversity and of industries. But also, we did some work in Gladstone industrial zone near Brisbane in Queensland in Australia. And there the industrial zone was focused around alumina refinery and a smelter. So it was basically largely one sector there. Yes, of course, there's less diversity. And it can be a disadvantage because there are not that many byproducts to exchange. But on the other hand, it also creates economies of scales in terms of the water needs are sometimes similar as well, which makes it then easier to do a water recycling facility to supply industry feed water to the industries. Or some of these companies, they have similar byproducts, so it may not be feasible to reuse one byproduct because there's not sufficient quantity. But if you have similar byproducts from the same companies, then it may become feasible. Then you can think about the waste to energy as well. But there are advantages and disadvantages. But if you look at the number of industrial synergies in industrial parks internationally, they are, as the Kwinana example shows, they are most diverse, and also Kallenburg in industry area where there are different industry sectors. because one element is as well, if industries in one industrial zone are competing with each other, they're not likely to talk to each other that much in here. And this is also the role of park management as well. Yes, you may be competing in certain areas, but what is our common ground? Water supply, because these companies are not competing on waste, right? They're not competing on water per se. So what is the common ground? And actually, let's work together, recognizing the competition and just stay out of this, because this is just doing business, right? But is that answer the question? This one slide, how did Kwinana become so successful? Again, this key role of park management as a platform for industry and stakeholder collaboration. Like say, they get the companies together on a regular basis. So the manager from the oil refinery knows the manager from the alumina refinery, from the chemical. If these personal connections, it's easier to find common solutions. And also the Kwinana Industry Council, they drive actually collective approaches to address regional challenges. This waste legislation, for example, this is a challenge. This community engagement, industry diversity, which we discussed already, but also the commitment and champions within the companies. Even in Kwinana, not all companies are at the same level of commitment, but within most companies, you have to find the champions actually who actually can see the economic benefits, environmental benefits, work with these champions, and they can get things moving within their companies and the industrial parks, and the others, they will join later as they see these opportunities emerging. So the companies in Kwinana, they understand that environmental and social risk are business risks, as illustrated in this waste to energy example. And there's a commitment, understanding this continuous improvement, move beyond the low-hanging fruits opportunity. I'm looking at my clock. We're running a little bit behind schedule, but what I really like is actually these interactions, and the more questions, the better. So we don't have to go through all of the slides. So let me work together with Ankit to determine which slides are most relevant. So please help me, Ankit, as well. And also, Melissa and the VNCPC, if you think there are specific areas you are interested in, raise it, and we will do our best to accommodate this. But here, this is also because Deepsea, you're already an advanced industrial park in terms of your park management here. Again, we can discuss this for half an hour, but can we highlight already some existing industrial synergies in Deepsea? Maybe just 2 examples that there are, maybe at the park level, or maybe some of the companies who would like to share an example with everybody. Are there some existing synergies already in Deepsea in terms of byproducts, utility sharing, services, supply chain synergies? Are there already some?
The only one I can think of is that we have a centralized wastewater treatment plant, and that all the wastewater of all the tenants is treated in the wastewater treatment plant.
Yep.
Yeah, that's actually the only one I can think of right now that we really exchange. We also, I have one more. The tenants have the opportunity to sign up in the waste collection. So we have one, they can choose themselves if they arrange waste collection on their own, or if they sign up with Deepsea. So for some tenants who subscribe for this, we arranged one garbage collection.
Yep. So that's a good example of a service synergy as well. And what we often found when we have this sort of discussion with different people, like as we discuss these, we always identify X number of industrial synergies already there. So you may not do it under this terminology. It doesn't matter. whatever we can do to create a better park and more efficient services. And maybe any of the companies which are present today, are you involved in any of these synergies already, or is this completely new to you? Please, is there any company who is already working on this? And later on, we will have a discussion on potential synergies, but is any existing synergy? And if everybody is quiet, then I assume this is not yet happening. Then it opens the door for many opportunities, right, to do more. Any VNC, Ting and team, are you aware of any existing synergies in Deepsea between companies? No. Shall we maybe think about it when we move, because we are tight on time. Think about it, and if you come across, say, just put it in the chat box, and once we see something in the chat box, then we will maybe share it in the team, because I think it's important also. Good. Let me, in the next slides, I will go relatively quickly, and you'll find more information in the references below. So the approach to develop industrial synergies, it's in a way actually very similar as to the resource efficiency and cleaner production approach as presented by the Cleaner Production Center yesterday. So it's really about, you know, planning an organization, like say, can we actually put a team together who start identifying the synergies? To do a preliminary assessment, as Melissa also said, like in terms of what are the inputs and outputs from the companies. Actually have an opportunity scoping workshop to identify the opportunity. So this is this preliminary and opportunity identification. And if there are promising opportunities, can we do actually feasibility studies? Some of them, they may happen straight away because it's so obvious in here. But for example, for water recycling, reuse of gypsum, there's further work to be done. And of course, that implementation, as you would expect. And again, this is a process of continuous improvement, because this step by step, don't try to do all synergy opportunities at the same time. Try to focus on the ones that there's the biggest impact and what you can achieve. Otherwise, it's just getting too much. Okay, let me very shortly, and this was also highlighted already by the Kwinana example. If you look at these, there's a bit of background. Can I ask somebody to mute their microphone, please? Can I maybe Ting, you can take care of this, to somebody turn off the microphone? Yes, thank you very much. So park management, it plays a key role in this process. We discussed this already in terms of bringing companies together, organize matchmaking of companies, address these common challenges in terms of facilitating access to finance, working together. What can we do in terms of upgrading the legislation? But the key role is facilitate this process. I think this is what the Kwinana example also shows, and in Kallenburg as well. Very quickly, because also my colleague Anke already presented this very quickly in session last week. So you can identify synergies in different ways. There's no right or wrong. You can use a combination, whatever works, I would say. You can collect the inputs and outputs from the companies and then see where there's a match. You can also just have bilateral discussions with the industry and say, well, what opportunities are you aware? Quickly explain them the concept, what type of opportunities are there, and then just talk to them. And then they will say, well, I think at this waste stream, I think we could do this. Review of international experiences like in Kwinana, Kallenburg, or elsewhere in Vietnam. This will also trigger interest. We cannot just copy and paste because the situation is different in Vietnam, of course, but we can learn from it. Opportunity workshops. This basically what we often do is actually then have a half-day workshop where we get companies together, we briefly explain the concept, and we actually facilitate this process, similar as we did with the resource efficiency yesterday, to identify opportunities as well and prioritize them and do the action planning. So these workshops are very powerful. But also use of automated tool, and this is one example. UNIDO has this industrial symbiosis identification tool, which I show in here. Very briefly, it's not a very complicated tool. The tool is just to identify top of the iceberg opportunity based on international examples. So, you can just use it when you go into a new industrial park. You can search by byproducts, and for example, you can select, if you open a tool, you can select a range of byproducts, which in this case it's wood residues. If you have wood residues, there are different names for it in here. What are possible providers of these waste residues? Here you can see ethanol, starch, paper, and the wood industry, of course. And what are potential users of these byproducts? Like, say, of course, if you have wood residues, a coal-fired power plant, biomass power plant, cement factory can also potentially use as alternative fuels. Where can you find practical examples? And everybody can download the tool and play with it yourself. You can also share it in the chat box. It's a very, oh, what's happening here? 2 seconds. Here. Play around with it. And if you have any questions, please reach out to the cleaner production team or Ankit or myself. We're more than happy to discuss further, but it's quite a straightforward tool. And of course, you can also search by the company type. So you can select different company types, and then it also identifies what are generic inputs that they use, what's happening, and what are outputs that they have, and what are potential users and alternative providers of these inputs and outputs. Maybe I leave it with this for the sake of time. Ankit, is that okay?
That's good, Dick. Yes.
Yeah, okay. In here, before I hand over back to Ankit, not all synergy opportunities that we identify will be of high interest and value. It's really, before we spend a lot of time, let's just do a reality check. What is the achievability? What are the anticipated benefits? What's the interest from park management and the company? So if it is super difficult, it doesn't mean, but with low benefits, maybe you want to focus on other things first. So the priority options are, of course, the synergy opportunities, which are relatively easy to do, and the benefits are high as well. So it's a very interactive exercise to do before doing to assist in actually selecting the opportunity for feasibility assessment. Because often, I had it a couple of times as well, where you do a feasibility study, but then later on it becomes clear, for this reason, there's no interest from top management to process it any further, or they actually have another reuse already identified. Do a reality check before you deep dive into a feasibility study, if it makes sense. With this, I hand over to Ankit.
Thank you, Dick, and thank you everyone for listening in. Hello again. The slide you now have in front of you, again, a slightly complicated one over here, is an actual example of some work Sophie's and the Vietnam National Cleaner Production Team, VNCPC, have done with UNIDO previously in Tra Ngoc Industrial Zone in Can Tho. And over here, you can see the different IES industrial synergy opportunities selected for feasibility studies listed down over here. On the top left, you will see the 4 arrows, the 4 colored arrows for waste and byproducts, for energy, for water, and shared services. And across the whole diagram, you can see how these are shared by different stakeholders that were identified as part of this extensive exercise for feasibility studies for industrial symbiosis. In the center, you have all the companies in the industrial zone, the industrial zone management board, and variety of waste and byproduct. For example, waste paper and cardboard, going from the companies or the management board to the waste processing and collecting company, who then sent it out to the paper making company, as you can see right at the top, or from the ESCO to the energy services company, the biomass going to a new biomass boiler at the fertilizer company, who then sent out the steam to paper making company, chemical fertilizer, the animal feed company, and so on. Likewise, in water, you can see the type A wastewater at the far left of your screen. Type A wastewater coming from companies that discharged such water, including a beverage company, a beer company, the dairy sector, where it was sent to a water tank from the wastewater treatment plant, and then it was sent out to companies that could use such water, type A water, by this wastewater treatment plant. And then many shared services, as you can see, cold storage services being shared, collection, logistics, transport, training, support, coordination, shared venues, and so on. So although this may on paper look very complicated, it is about identifying what you have as additional, what is not required, and finding a user for that. And when those two come together, an arrow is drawn, essentially creating this diagram. On the following slides, we won't go through these in detail in the interest of time, but you can quickly see, how pre-feasibility studies were done by, on this slide, for example, a technical feasibility, which looked at the technical options, the ease of implementation, the environmental and social benefits, the governance and legal aspect, when the feasibility for steam supply by a shared boiler system was taken a look at. So this is, one of the ways of undertaking such a pre-feasibility study, which gives you, as you can quickly see on that next screen, you list down the revenues, your assumptions on how you generate those revenues, your capital, your operational expenditure, and then you look at your financing options, whether you do it with a fully commercial loan, with a combination of your own finance and a commercial loan, or 100% of your own finance, to look at the payback period. And through this pre-feasibility, you then identify opportunities which are technically feasible and economically viable with a good payback period of a couple of years or thereabouts, depending on the benefit. Of course, the examples and the assumptions you see over here of annual interest rate of 11%, I think might be higher because this was done a few years ago to what it is now. But this is what you need to do in the current context. On the next slide, just very quickly, a series of funding mechanism, depending on whether these are company level investment or park level investment you're looking at, and a combination of private financing opportunity mechanism that can be used. Interestingly and importantly, for park level investment, there is also the option of PPPs that you can opt for, public-private partnerships, and so on. So on that note, on that final slide are a list of national financial mechanisms that had been identified by us over one of our previous projects in 2018, and similarly identifying the name of the mechanism, so where such finances could come from, the type of EIP opportunity that could be financed, and the key benefits of such financial mechanism could be identified at this early feasibility study stage to understand how such industrial symbiosis opportunities could be funded, financed, and be sustainable over a period of time. So apologies for rushing through those final slides. They are self-explanatory, and we would be happy to, of course, take additional questions or comments either now or by messages or email later on. But we hope this give you a little bit of interest into this. We would like to spend more time on some case studies that are coming up. So if there are no burning questions, I can hand over to Dick, who can start off with the case studies.
Thank you. And thank you, Ankit. And I see a question in the chat box. Can you share your experience with implementing industrial synergies without legal regulations? Very good question. And I think, as Alexandro said, some of the examples that Ankit showed are already some examples. If you look at the shared services in terms of these community forums, air, water quality monitoring, doing it jointly, these do not have legal implications per se.
Yep.
Also, if you look at the reuse of the lime kiln, this example from the cement plant by 2 other companies, there were some legal implications, but it wasn't a major barrier because of the classification and the transport was relatively easy to do. Then for the water recycling, between the companies in Kwinana, in the Western Australia, the regulation is if you would like to facilitate or reuse wastewater from one company by another, the one company actually has to become a water providing company. This is a legal implication, a requirement, but this, as I understand from the company, this was fairly easy to do. So, of course, there are legal aspects to any synergy opportunity, but it's same as you do any business development opportunity. There are some legal implications, but that's doing part of normal business, I would argue.
Sorry,
yeah,
Dick, just very quickly to build on that, I think, you know, beyond the environmental aspect or the legal aspect, I think the socio and economic aspect is a key one, and it's important. You know, we know that many companies you know, sectors often see just environment as only mandatory and only want to do mandatory items, but the environmental benefit, but also the other drivers that I mentioned earlier, how it increases profitability, but also becoming fit to supply, how it attracts more suppliers and customers from a different base that may not have been identified earlier is important. So do emphasize on the tenants and within your company, if you are a tenant company itself, to your management, that there is a need to go beyond just meeting the legal requirement to become, you know, a company at a global level that can win quickly customers in different countries who have high sustainability agendas. Thank you, Dick. Thank you for your questions, everyone, as well.
Thank you, Ankit. And I'm looking at the clock, and let's maybe take a step back briefly. If I can kindly suggest, because we have some case studies for Kwinana where we go in a bit more depth for waste to energy, reuse of byproducts and the water. And then Ankit has some more international experiences. And we also have an interactive exercise which we can do with you if you wish. May I suggest that we go for another 35 minutes until 1:45, and 4:45 Vietnam time, and then I can spend a bit less time on the next session, if that's okay. But also depends on your interest as well. For example, maybe let's on the next slide here. I have from Kwinana. No. What I'm suggesting is that we continue with this session on industrial synergies until 3:45. So a little bit longer than planned, or 5 or 10 minutes more. Then we have a break, and then we can still do the last module. Is that...
Tôi đề nghị là ông Dick vẫn tiếp tục ạ, nhưng mà chúng ta sẽ không có nghỉ giải lao, bởi vì là chúng ta thời gian của chúng ta rất là hạn hẹp, mà chúng ta có rất nhiều các nội dung, và chúng ta có thể ông Dick có thể tiếp tục trình bày và tương tác với các cái đại biểu tham dự, thì ai có thể nghỉ thì họ có thể nghỉ tại chỗ, và chúng ta cứ tiếp tục ạ. Xin phép ạ.
Okay, yeah. Thank you. That sounds a good approach. And also, we're more than happy also to have bilateral calls with you if there's anything particular that you're interested in, to have a more in-depth discussion. So let me go through the Kwinana case study and at least give you a flavor of the work done on the reuse of large volume inorganic byproducts, energy and water. Is there any topic that is of most interest to you? That I can spend more time on this and less time on the others. Melissa, is there anything that's like from these three that you would like to most of interest or most relevant to the next steps in Deepsea?
From my feeling, I would say water because I'm in charge of water. But but I think waste and byproducts are important because it's a topic Deepsea doesn't have much knowledge about.
Okay.
Because for water and energy, we have quite some data of our customers because we supply we supply these to them, and we know almost what we get back. But waste and byproducts is difficult for Deepsea to identify them from the customers because we need input about their processes, and sometimes this is confidential information, so difficult for us to get this.
Okay, good. What I will do, I will go relatively quickly through the slides. If there's anything you would like to know more about, you can just raise your hand, anybody, and just ask, right? So we are guided by you. Is that okay?
Okay, great.
Otherwise, we spent another 3 hours, and there's much to tell, but just you get a copy of the presentation in any case. So without further ado, so for Kwinana, we have a number of slides on waste, energy, and water. But first of all, if you go to the website of the KIC, the Kwinana Industry Council, this is actually their homepage. And you can actually see that they're really promoting these synergies already as a first on their homepage to showcase the economic, environmental, and social benefit. It is a world-leading example, and they're really using it to market their industrial park. So this slide actually shows international examples of reuses of inorganic byproducts. And these inorganic byproducts, they are typically the large volume byproducts generated by companies. So sand, foundry sand, it's used in construction fill and concrete insulation structures. Chemical gypsum, it's about some in the USA, it's 93% is already being reused as well. In these publications, it's not specified, but it can be for soil amendment, for plasterboard manufacturing as well. This depends also on the quality of the gypsum. This is steel making slag. It's reused in the USA is about 90% as alternative aggregate in concrete, as a stabilizing additive for road construction. Fly and bottom ash from a coal-fired power station. In the EU, it's 40 to up to 100%, and the uses there are as alternative raw material for cement production and the structural fill and asphalt aggregate. I'm not going to all examples in here, but international experience show that these large volume inorganic byproducts are already reused to different extents in different countries. So for Kwinana, the current regulations, they do not really favor or encourage the reuse of these alternative construction materials. So it's a challenge, key challenge in Western Australia. But actually what this graph figure shows that if you look at the total amounts of available industrial byproducts, it's huge, like fly ash, 25,000 tons per annum. Red sand from alumina refinery, 2,200 kilotons per annum. I'm not going through this list, but the amounts of these inorganic byproducts available are enormous. So of course, there's a strong interest and from the companies actually to find reuses for it. On the other hand, if you look at Western Australia, if you look at the upcoming construction projects, the amount of construction materials that they use is enormous as well. In terms of clean fill that they use, 40,000 kilotons they need. For other construction materials, more than 10,000 kilotons. We are talking enormous numbers here in terms of what is available as inorganic byproduct and what is needed for upcoming future projects. But in Kwinana, there was still this mismatch in terms of the legislative framework to allow the reuse of these alternative byproducts for the construction projects. So there was a key need to do further work on this. And what I said before, there's actually to drive forward this reuse of byproducts on a significant scale, then there's this need for a multi-stakeholder approach. And this is where it's going in Kwinana as well, where also the Kwinana Industry Council plays a facilitating role as well. So it's really connecting the producers base, the producers of gypsum, this chemical facility, the steel companies, but also technology providers and the regulatory framework, that actually the regulatory framework really more encourages actually the reuse of the byproducts from the producer base by the customer base in building construction, but also mineral and metals production. And there is a need in some cases to do some processing as well, even mixing different types of byproducts as well, to making sure that the byproducts actually meet the regulatory requirements, but also the market requirements to use it in different types of fields. So this approach has been ongoing in Kwinana for a while. And what we can say, is it easy today? Not yet, but at least they are getting there, because as you can see from the volumes, it's very significant. So at the moment, there's actually the reuse of wet sands from the alumina refinery is actually being used now as a subgrade material for road construction. So it's actually happening now, and this is actually quite a long pilot road where we look at, like, say, okay, we are reusing inorganic byproducts, and then they also monitor the potential emissions which are expected to be nihil, also to build the confidence that industrial byproducts are potential good alternative construction materials. So this is a development that's happening in Western Australia. Also, the co-processing of waste byproducts in a cement plant. There are some learnings from Kwinana, because this is also we worked on. The cement industry, as we all know, they can use a variety of inorganic byproducts and raw material in terms of slag, but also gypsum, water treatment residues, fly ash, etc., because they contain magnesium oxide, sodium oxide, iron oxide, etc. But when it doesn't mean that cement industry can use any of these byproducts, it's very careful mix that they have to use. So the introduction of any new material can change the balance of others. And also, when working on this topic, it was important to understand that conventional raw materials are also low cost to the cement factory. So when promoting the reuse of inorganic byproduct as an alternative raw material for cement industry, it must be competitive as well. So it's important to understand the economic, environmental, and technical benefit and challenges and work a way around it. But cement factories, this was also the experience in Kwinana, they're usually very well prepared and also very interested to explore the opportunities as well. So I'm aware I'm going very quickly, but hopefully you get a flavor. But the key learnings on this, on the reuse of these large volume inorganic byproducts, is to focus on a set of prioritized byproducts. This is what we did in Kwinana as well, and that was on the red sand from alumina refinery, and actually create a change there and find really practical short-term and high volume reuses to make it happen. And the key is also to link it into local construction developments, because in Western Australia, on the one hand, there's a shortage of virgin construction materials. On the other hand, there are these stockpiles of inorganic byproducts, which can be alternative construction materials. Lessons learned: do a market assessment, transportation costs, look at the regulatory benefits, and work on community perception through these community forums. maybe I stop here on the inorganic byproducts. Melissa, you turned on your video. Does it mean you would like to ask something?
Not in particular this time.
Okay.
I just had someone coming over to discuss on some.
Okay.
So I turned it off.
Okay. Shall I move on?
Yes, no problem.
Okay. No. So maybe for energy, maybe I give the two key take-home messages. For energy, there's already an existing cogeneration facility with the BP refinery. What actually this cogeneration facility does, it takes the refinery fuel gas from the BP refinery, it mixes with natural gas, and then produces steam electricity for the oil refinery. So it's a more efficient way of producing steam. And of course, there are environmental benefits because actually this cogeneration facility enabled actually for the oil refinery to replace the old boilers in here. Very briefly, if you look at the amount of waste heat which is being released by the industries in Kwinana, we did actually a survey of the energy uses and the energy losses from the Kwinana industries, and this actually diagram actually shows actually the results. I don't know why my screen keeps on, but actually the energy losses from flue gases are enormous. Like say 5,000, almost 6,000 terajoules per year are being emitted to the atmosphere. So it's a big. This diagram highlights the potential for energy recovery, and perhaps a similar exercise in terms of looking into the energy losses in Deepsea could be of added value as well to identify the opportunity for on-site or park level energy recovery. And of course, this diagram then actually shows actually the temperature and the energy content. The key message is the potential for energy recovery depends on your temperature and the total energy content. That's why we met these two parameters. So what it actually shows actually that a number of flue gases from the companies, look at this one here. It's 4,000 terajoules per year, and at 500 degrees Celsius. So the potential for energy recovery is enormous. So this is also the added value of doing this exercise. Where is the potential? Don't necessarily focus on the energy streams in this corner. Again, prioritize your efforts. And in most cases, we found actually companies in Kwinana, they were not aware of this. So we had actually an opportunity identification workshop on this. And even by showing this graph, it actually triggers work by tenant companies themselves to actually investigate the opportunities. So you show them the opportunities, you highlight it. In some cases, they actually then investigate the energy recovery opportunities themselves. We also actually looked at what are the opportunities for park level energy recovery from flue gases, without going into detail, but we did a whole assessment of what are the avoided energy use, what's the net present value of some of these energy recovery options. I'm not going into detail, but you can see there are a range of options. Oops. So maybe highlight two. Say company two, I cannot present the company names because this is confidential. Company two supplying steam to company three. If you look at the net present value, you see significant numbers in here. It makes business sense to do energy recovery. And of course, if you look at this table, you see some more traditional energy recovery technologies as heat exchanger, but also more advanced technologies in terms of the Kalina or the organic Rankine cycle. This is a more efficient way to produce steam electricity. So without going into all the details, it makes business sense actually to identify your priority energy losses and then see what can you do, where is the business case to do the energy recovery. And based on this work, then the companies themselves, they started to implement it. And this is also the role of the facilitators in this process. Because as soon as a business opportunity, companies, they recognize it, they then start implementing it. The key lessons learned from energy recovery, first of all, do an energy survey. What are the uses of energy? Because if you produce a energy and you can recover it. If there's no need for this recovered energy in terms of cooling or heating, it's not going to happen in terms of this exchange. So really understanding the uses, demands, and the losses is key. And then have actually a workshop with the companies and present the results. And this is what we did in here as well. And what we need to know, there are changing business drivers, as Melissa also said, in terms of the SDGs, the increasing energy costs. Focus on energy recovery from flue gases in this case, because they have the highest energy content. Focus on those energy streams. Proven simple technologies seem most attractive. And of course, if you do park level energy recovery, you can only do this within minimum between neighboring companies because the energy losses are significant over large distances. And of course, you need to understand the needs of the user. So it's if they don't have a need for specific energy, it's not going to happen. This was in a very quickly energy recovery. So I move on. Make sense? Okay.
Yes.
Okay. Water. Oops. So as I mentioned already, there's already this water recycling facility in Kwinana. It's a joint initiative of the Water Corporation and the Kwinana Industries, facilitated by Park Management. It really facilitates to secure the long-term water supply of the industries, and it's about 6,000 megaliters per year. It's quite a big facility. Capital costs are 25 million. This is actually invested by the water utility company, and the return on investment are to these long-term supply contracts with the water-intensive industries. Also, same as for energy, if you want to know what are the potential synergies for water reuses between the companies, you need to understand what are the water streams available in the industrial park. And this is also an exercise that we did in Kwinana. So the power plant, they had water cooling, blow down water with this qualities and like about 1,000 megaliters per year. But also a steel producer, boiler blow down, and a fertilizer plant, they have treated effluents. So it's important to understand the quantities and the qualities, and then also assess, well, what are the water needs from the industries in terms of, this is just one example, because the work covered much more. So can we actually match the available water with the water needs of the industries? So this is one way to do it. And by doing this exercise for all the Kwinana industries, we identified a number of water opportunities. A total of 25 opportunities were identified in terms of water exchanges between the companies and joint treatment of water. One example of an implemented water synergy is actually the nickel refinery. They had an oily wastewater which contained some hydrocarbons. And actually this water was actually disposed as a hazardous waste. The oil refinery is actually based next to the nickel refinery. Their whole wastewater treatment plant is built around treating hydrocarbons. So instead of disposing this oily wastewater as a hazardous waste, high cost, is actually being sent to the nearby oil refinery. Because, and this is also, and of course, the nickel refinery pays a small fee for this, but it's a very strong business case because high costs for waste disposal are reduced and environmental benefits as well. The learnings, very briefly, oops. 2 seconds. This one. Again, if water synergies to progress is in Deepsea, as mapping of your water inputs and outputs and the framework that I just showed you on the slide can be a helpful tool in this, and to do a water synergy scoping study, and then again, get all the water intensive companies together and say, well, but what can we do together? Where's the business case? Lessons learned, currently low water prices, but it's increasing rapidly in Kwinana. And the changing drivers for business conversation and promising opportunities exist at the company to company level, but also collectively as well. Maybe here I stop. I'm looking at the clock as well, but hopefully we gave you a flavor of the type of work that could be done to drive forward these water, energy, and reuses of inorganic byproducts. Okay. With this, any questions on Kwinana before I hand over to Ankit? Did it make sense?
Trong phần chat box ấy thì có rất nhiều câu hỏi. Tôi nghĩ là cái phần này cũng liên quan đến các cái phần trình bày của ông Ankit và ông Đích, thì các ông có thể dà các cái câu hỏi này và trả lời cho các những người tham gia được không ạ?
Mr. Thin, you're on mute. We can't hear you. I don't know if you said anything or a translation.
Tôi nói các anh nghe có rõ không ạ?
Yes,
we can.
Vâng, tức là trong cái phần chat box ấy thì tôi thấy là có rất nhiều các cái câu hỏi của các đại biểu tham gia, thì những câu hỏi này liên quan đến cái phần trình bày của ông Ankit và ông Đích. Thế thì xin mời các ông dà những các cái câu hỏi này và có thể trả lời luôn cho các cái đại biểu họ tham dự được không ạ?
Yeah. Yeah. And I think we already addressed the question on the legal side of, because this, and is there any other question? Like say it's, Ankit, do you see any question we haven't addressed?
I think, we have talked about most of these on the chat. I'm not entirely sure. I think there was one earlier about who the champion would be. Having a champion in IS realization is pretty important. Can you elaborate, please, further on that? To some extent, we've through the presentation talked about the key role of park management, but I think there are a variety of stakeholders as well. There has to be a central body that does it, and I think Deepsea management is doing a great role at doing so. But then there is a role, of course, a significant role for the tenant companies to play. Then there is, of course, the role of the government in both legislation but also facilitation, making the park more attractive above and beyond just the typical industrial park setting. Then maybe educational institute who could provide the right kind of staff and training and so on, as well as the local communities who might be able to provide the other synergies, for example, a local waste management company or use of local resources so that you're not traveling longer distances and so on. But in terms of championship, I think, the park always plays a key role within each company who will then be a significant part of industrial symbiosis. There will have to be at least nominated 1, 2, 3 champions, depending on the size of the opportunity. But maybe Dick, you can elaborate on that if I missed a point.
No, your explanation was very clear. At the end of the day, an industry champion is a person at a company or park management who's very proactive and can well communicate within the company and with other stakeholders, and also understand the business opportunity offered by industrial synergies. Some cases, if people are not really see the business benefits, they're not going to drive it. If they're not really proactive, they're not necessarily always a champion. So it's really a personal characteristic of people who, hopefully like many of you in the room, who have an interest in this topic and say, well, I think there's a business opportunity. What can we do and to drive change?
Absolutely. Interest, control, influence, all of these are very important part. If you do not have control, you might have a significant interest, but can't change much, or at the very least influence within your company, within the park itself, and nearby to make these work.
And maybe one learning from Kwinana is like, because for one of the synergy opportunities in Kwinana, we tried to get one company on board for almost 1.5 years, but there was no champion within that company. They didn't show an interest. Yes, there was an opportunity, but we didn't get the traction. So afterwards, you can waste a lot of time if the company isn't interested yet rather work with the people who are willing and interested to move forward, and the other ones, they will come on board later on. I think that's you can waste a lot of time by engaging the people who are not interested in engaging. Then so be it.
Yeah, I totally agree on this. And I think for Deepsea, it's also very important that we can show off some pilot cases and some projects which we then can communicate to our other tenants to show, look, this is possible. This was the investment linked to it. This is the outcome that we want to achieve with it. So we can show off with a few showcases, with a few pilot projects, and then indeed, once we have some, more will come up, I think.
Exactly. So, and by having a couple of good examples, they say, yes, it's possible in Deepsea. Let's do more together. And this is also how it happened in Kwinana. So it's step by step. Don't try to do everything at the start. It's just too overwhelming. Just get a few synergies going and go from there. Okay. Looking at the clock, Sabi, Ankit, would you maybe share some experiences from Vietnam?
Sure, I would be happy to. We will look at the clock, and I have 4 examples of good sustainable practices that could be resource efficiency, that could be industrial symbiosis, depending on how they are implemented. But these are interesting examples, and hence sharing with all of you. We will go through them quickly because there are a number of slides and we are behind on schedule. But let's start with the first one. Dick, if you could move to the next slide. And we start by looking at the first case study or example of floating PV panels, photovoltaic panels, or solar energy generation. Globally, all reservoirs, we are talking about, where these could be set up. And globally, all reservoirs in the world, with a 25% coverage, only 1/4 of all these reservoirs would be able to host 5,700 gigawatt of floating PV panels and produce about 8,000 TWh, terawatt hours of electricity just with. So, if you imagine the size of what is available through just, a quarter of this coverage. Solar panels are mounted on pontoon-based surfaces, within such floating areas, kept in place by anchoring and mooring, and location could be various, but the 2 highlighted over there are industrial park water bodies, reservoirs within or around a water park, industrial park, wastewater treatment sites, and then there could be hydrogen dam, irrigation reservoirs, retention ponds, and so on. These are examples of where they have been set up, and looking at how a 10 megawatt floating power PV plant saves land cost burden of about $352,000 US and levelized tariff reduction of 0.026 per kilowatt hours. So 39% reduction. Then land-based. So I know, Melissa, you're talking about this land-based, and of course, I'm not entirely aware whether something like this is technically feasible, whether that kind of opportunity is there. But increasingly, a floating PV panel opportunity is becoming, more and more common. Underneath that, on that chart, you can see, the size legend in those circles on the right, the size of a plant, and that orange dot over there for Vietnam showing 2019, and the installation cost in US dollar per watt peak for photovoltaics, solar photovoltaics as floating ones. So this is increasingly becoming more and more a feasible opportunity for many enterprises as well as industrial park. On the next slide, we will see some examples. A 47.5 megawatt floating power plant, PV plant, was installed on the reservoir in Vietnam, being the first floating solar farm in Vietnam. This 51 million project was developed by the DHD joint stock company and supported by a loan agreement from the Asian Development Bank. You might all be aware of this. And again, a few months ago, 2 more large-scale solar projects were commissioned, again, making this the largest floating PV cluster in Southeast Asia. So in terms of, industrial parks, there are opportunities for using existing space, for example, a reservoir to create an FPV plant, a floating PV plant. Additional source of power is created, which you're already doing through the rooftop solar. So additional sources of power for sale to companies within the IP or back to the national grid or to the surrounding communities. There is, no requirement of additional land, because land is often very precious on industrial parks. And it's important to hence, utilize all those underutilized spaces or spaces that can have additional impact. And then industries on an IP could co-utilize this source of renewable energy. Very quickly looking at the pros and cons. Apologies, just one moment. I have, looking at the pros and cons, quite a few of them, and starting with the negatives or the disadvantages, there is a relatively large cost of installation. There is this overall disadvantage, of course, that everything is a waste at the end of its life. But comparing the overall life cycle, does this have a good positive impact? It allows to secure profitability, but then that may also prove challenging. Depending on what the cost for the energy tariff over in Vietnam is. It cannot be installed at sea because of its angular position, so you require certain water bodies in order to do so. Cost of maintenance is higher than conventional solar panels, so it's not just as easy. It could potentially cause disturbance to the aquatic life if there is any in the water body. And there are higher requirements for floating platforms to hold this. Typically, solar panels, PV panels are becoming longer and longer in life, and hence the structure to hold it needs to be there for a longer period of time. But then there are many, many benefits. I won't read all of them, but they can be installed in industrial parks with low land availability, as we talked about earlier. And power generated from industrial park reservoirs can be used by tenants, and excess power could be sold back to the grid, plus a list of other benefits over there. So not going into detail, but you can read that at your own leisure. On the next page, looking at, I see there is a few questions over here, and maybe we can come to the end of this presentation and address them as we go along, if that's okay, everyone. Okay, so next case study over here that looks at co-processing of waste in cement kilns. And essentially co-processing is the use of waste material in manufacturing processes as a source of energy or resource recovery, and the resultant reduction in the use of conventional fuel. So rather than using a conventional fuel, you use some kind of a waste to use it as an energy. There are in different countries specific guidelines for co-processing waste, and of course, you will need to check specifically are in Vietnam. We can of course assist in that, but if you look at this, currently Vietnam has more than 76 cement kilns. If each of this cement kiln could dispose or tackle 200 tons of waste per day, the cement industry can dispose 5.3 million tons of waste per year, and handling roughly about 23% of the total municipal solid waste of the region, of the country. So I think that's just a quick summary, and to understand a bit more of co-processing of waste in cement kilns. What kind of waste could be used? On the next slide, please, Dick. There are a variety of options over here within the cement plant. Local municipality, there could be sewage sludge. From the smelting, there is copper slag. In the construction and building material sector, it could be waste board, gypsum, and so on. From the printing industry, pulp and paper, agriculture, plastic, automotive. The list is endless. What can be waste in many, many industries. Often untreatable or difficult to treat waste could be used as co-processing as well. The figure on the right, we talked about this yesterday, the waste hierarchy. There was a question on the reduction, reuse, recycling earlier today as well. There was a conversation about this. And then co-processing in the recovery option under EU regulation it does not classify under disposal. As you see in that red arrow going down, it classifies because you are able to reuse a significant aspect of waste and convert it into a raw material or an input material like energy. So right from prevention or elimination, reduction, reuse, recycling, and we talk about re-engineering, redesigning, and so on. Resource co-processing falls under recovery options, and it is a positive overall net positive impact on the environment. There are many pros and cons for this as well. On the next slide, please, Dick. Reduction in use of fossil fuels being the primary benefit over here. It reduces environmental burden. Most waste breaks down in the very high temperature of the kilns, cement kilns. It goes as high as 1500 degrees Celsius. Co-processing is less expensive than setting up a separate incineration plant or a waste to energy plant, and the use of alternative fuels promote better waste management practices, reduces greenhouse gas emissions. But there are also disadvantages in the sense that there are lack of specific standards in the cement industry. Globally, many parts of the world, there is a lack of consideration of local community, for example, and environment while designing these plants. There is, a very significant negative of limited public acceptance. It is often seen as burning and what harm and impact it will have on the environment. But with improved technology, you are able to create a very good ecosystem for allowing minimal impact through air pollution to the environment. So again, not going to details, but you have the list over there, and we are happy to share the slides in both languages with you. An example over here of a company, GeoCycle, a waste management brand of Holcim, now also Mse, that takes over waste from a number of footwear manufacturers in Vietnam and has so far converted just under 700,000 tons of industrial waste through co-processing in cement kilns. A variety of opportunities for industrial parks, where promotion of better waste management, higher fuel efficiency, better management of sludge, and reduction in greenhouse. So it helps with your SDGs. It helps with a lot of environmental as well as socio-economical aspects. Moving on to the third case study. Apologies once again for rushing through things, but this is about the industrial Internet of Things. I'm sure many of you are aware of the term Internet of Things or Industry 4.0, but this is where industrialization is moving. It is all about integrating technology and machinery and computers for intelligent industrial operations. And manufacturing is the largest industry that constitutes the IoT, Internet of Things spending, such as on software, hardware, and so on. And IIoT, which is Industrial Internet of Things, is a special significance for industrial parks. So looking at the following slide, we'll skip one more over here, Dick. What are the next one, please? What are the pros and cons, and then we'll look at a quick case study that I came across and we can discuss that. But the benefits are improvement in operational efficiency, reduction in downtime because you are managing it remotely and making the whole process more efficient. It promotes improvement of productivity in different sectors. It improves worker safety, a very important social element comes into play as well. It helps in the generation of new business opportunities, enhancing product innovation, again, a very important SDG, and then helping in reduction of asset lifecycle cost, promoting better understanding of customer demand, but also having the disadvantages where an unsecure IoT system could lead to disruptions to operations, monetary loss potentially as well. It also requires the right skill sets to manage and operate an IIoT. It requires the right expertise. So that is something that needs to be developed over time. There is currently no standardization like you see in cryptocurrencies and so on. Similarly, in IoT and how it applies to industry, you are seeing more and more frameworks supporting this, but there is no major standardization. There will be internal system barriers, and the current technologies could also be limited or restrictive. So these are some of the cons for this. But there was an interesting case study that I came across on the next slide, please, Dick. Opinum, the Belgian energy management technology provider, has made it possible to achieve something that was never done previously in Vietnam, which was monitoring the supply and energy management of the deep sea zone. And I was looking at you, Melissa, earlier when we were talking about industrial synergy, because I came across this, and it's a proud moment. It's quite good, and maybe later on you can talk to us a bit more about this. But I don't need to elaborate on this any further. I will maybe hear it from directly from your mouth. But the opportunities overall of IIoT are significant. It allows for promotion of better collection of data, reduction of power consumption, improvement of productivity. We looked at the benefits, so not again going into detail, but for companies to work together, it is increasingly more and more important to adapt such innovative technologies and integrate industrial symbiosis in there. And then I'll move on to the final example, again, very conscious of the time, not going into too much detail. And this is about chemical leasing, which UNIDO has been very active for a very long time, since 2004, with the support of the Austrian government to specially look at sustainability in the chemical sector. And chemical leasing is where the performance-based business model shifts the focus from increasing sales volume of chemical towards a value-based approach that decouples payment from volume. So we can look at maybe the final slide over there. Please, Dick, let's skip the next one, the one after. And generally in industrial park, chemical consumption can be reduced through RECP processes or through symbiosis between companies, and chemical leasing can be used to reuse, recycle, and recover chemicals and solvents within these industrial parks. Through the process of chemical leasing, the overall cost for specific services can be significantly controlled or reduced. For example, water treatment costs can be reduced by setting a fixed payment-based fee on a cubic meter basis, for example, instead of ton of treatment chemical used. For companies within an industrial park, adopting such a model or a concept is likely to help promote better business relations, market competitiveness, and so on, while increasing profits. So adoption of such business model will help again with the SDGs, circular economy, and promote better waste management overall. On the previous slide, a variety of pros and cons as seen with the other case studies. But again, with the limitation of time, I won't go into detail, but the negatives, just very quickly to highlight, would be there is a lack of maturity. It is not a mature market. There is not sufficient knowledge in the chemical leasing market. So it is still evolving, but it's a big market coming up. The expertise is still limited. There is a lack of sufficient information about the life cycle cost, end of life, cost of treatment of chemicals, and lack of strict waste legislation, and chemicals being such a special, hazardous, toxic potential components. There is more so an emphasis on this, but there are significant benefits in economic, environmental, and social, especially a reduction of health hazards for those using these chemicals. And Melissa talked about the plastic roads, and that is in some way also, how chemicals from Dow or some kind of such components are used to create other synergies within a park. So again, a quick example, but I'm going to stop over here for questions and comments from the group. Again, thank you very much, everyone, for your interest today.
Thank you. And Ankit, there were a few questions related to your case study in the chat box.
Mm-hmm.
And I think some of them you may have already answered. Could you be, what about the impacts of floating PVs on agricultural activity, which you highlighted as well?
Absolutely,
and
yeah. Mm-hmm.
Maybe, and is there a minimum area to make floating PVs economically viable? Like, is there anything else to share? What you?
Sorry, I don't have, I think if that was from Melissa, sorry, I don't have anything top of my head. We have been looking into this extensively for two reasons. One is, as I mentioned, you know, the Sophie's team in India is looking at end of life, what happens to end of life PV panels, including floating solar, because they are slightly different modules, often sandwiched between glass on both sides rather than EVA at the other end. So looking into that, but also what could be different sizes for this. We have been speaking to a US-based company who's doing operations in the southern part of India, but also in Maldives. They are currently, you know, also unsure themselves. They're trying different models, but happy to look more into this to let you know what an optimum size for something like this could be. Definitely come back to you on that, Melissa.
Thank you, Ankit. Perfect. Looking at my clock, well, we still have a total of 1 hour left for this training. And also we had 50 minutes allocated at the end for questions and comments, which we have now throughout this presentation, which is great.
Vâng, xin phép được ngắt lời ông Đích một chút, tức là để cho cái không khí nó thay đổi một chút thì ban tổ chức là xin phép được đề nghị các quý vị, bởi vì chúng tôi sợ là đến sát buổi thì có một số các quý vị sẽ bận không tham dự được, thì ban tổ chức sẽ chia sẻ cái bảng đánh giá về cái hội thảo ở đây, và xin mời các quý vị đánh giá cái buổi hội thảo này. Còn một phần nhỏ của ông Đích sau đó, nhưng mà tôi nghĩ là chắc nó cũng không có tác động nhiều, nhưng mà cũng xin các quý vị là vui lòng là đánh giá cho chúng tôi, để chúng tôi biết được là cái cách thức tổ chức hội thảo này, mặc dù là Covid thì nó có mang lại lợi ích gì cho doanh nghiệp hay không, và cần phải cải tiến những cái gì để những các lần sau chúng tôi sẽ có những cái cải tiến và những cái phục vụ nó tốt hơn ạ. Và xin mời các bạn hỗ trợ kỹ thuật sẽ đưa cái bảng câu hỏi này lên, và cũng xin được mời các quý vị đại biểu là cho những cái đánh giá đấy. Xin cảm ơn.
Thank you. Very good point. And for the next module, we can do quicker as well. So I think we still okay with timing. And I'm just showing this slide in here based on the international examples that we have shown to you and the discussion that we had. Do you already have ideas for synergy opportunity for Deepsea? And of course, this type of exercise we would normally do in a half-a-day session at the location. So this does not replace this exercise, but can we also hear from you to see what do you see as opportunities for Deepsea in terms of byproduct synergy opportunities, water recycling, service synergies, urban industrial synergies? What are some key opportunities? Can we get some views? And they don't have to be, there's no right or wrong, we just brainstorming, we just also think. And we already learned about waste to energy as an opportunity for the future. Anybody from the companies or the VNCPC, based on your knowledge in Vietnam, on what could be done to mix up also the speakers in this event, just to hear from the others? What are some opportunities for Deepsea?
Và chúng tôi thấy Xin phép đích là hiện nay chúng thấy mới có 14 người là đánh giá thôi ạ. Vâng, chúng ta còn khoảng hơn 15 xin lỗi, còn khoảng 17 người nữa. Vâng, xin mời các quý vị tiếp tục chọn.
Yeah, and the questionnaire you can leave on until the end of the session and then just close it. So as long as it is on the screen, just leave it in there. You can fill it out at your convenience. But if you look at synergy opportunities, is there anything that's maybe from the international examples that say, well, we could do this for Deepsea as well? Alternative fuels in cement plant, for example. Is any, Melissa, may I put you on the spot? Like just to, is anything like say worth, say, what about this service or byproduct or, but you know?
Actually, I can give already a little look into some projects we are currently working on. But we need the help of the tenants. So by this, I already informed them. We are looking into a collection of plastics. We would really like to set up a plastic collection inside the industrial zone. We have a third party we want to work with who is also they focus really on the communities and to train communities, to raise awareness about plastic waste. And I think as being an industrial zone close to the ocean, it would be a very good opportunity for us to cooperate in this. Last year, we organized the waste collection event. Due to COVID, this is a bit difficult this year, but in there we also collected a lot of waste, a lot of plastics in the ocean, but also on a daily basis, I think many of our tenants, including Deepsea, we generate a lot of plastic, and we are currently looking into some opportunities to reuse the plastic, not only recycle, but really find an end solution, a new life for it really into the circular economy. For this, we need input from our tenants, which kinds of plastics they generate, what is do they need to pay to discharge this waste, or do they get some money to discharge this waste? This is very important information for us. What is the amount of waste they generate? And then based on this, we can set up a cooperation with this third party, which would be beneficial for all the tenants, for Deepsea, and also for the community, because it will generate, it will also be a community involvement.
Thank you, Melissa, for sharing. I think that's an excellent opportunity that we can be explored. And this is also happening in other industrial parks as well. For example, in the East London Industrial Development Zone, actually there's a company actually established a pilot facility to actually process the waste plastics from industry, but also from the surrounding communities, and to produce oils and waxes out of it. So these developments are happening around the world, and these are coming to Vietnam as well. So I think that's it's a business opportunity as well. And of course, it also addresses a very significant environmental problem as well, especially in the ocean. Okay. Any from the tenant companies, do you have a very large waste stream, for example, and are you looking into, is any reuse opportunity or here? What do you generate? Can we get some feedback? Nobody is? maybe think with your and team, based on your experience in Deepsea, what do you see as some potential synergy opportunities for Deepsea? Must be more.
Thực ra thì tôi cũng chưa có cái cơ hội, bởi vì đáng lẽ nếu như mà không có Covid thì chúng tôi sẽ có dịp được khảo sát và làm việc với các anh chị, các doanh nghiệp ở Deepsea thì sẽ có nhận diện được các cơ hội rõ ràng hơn. Nhưng mà ở đây thì chúng tôi có thể thấy được một số các cái ví dụ, chẳng hạn như là đặc biệt là như chúng tôi cũng thể một số kinh nghiệm mà chúng tôi đã thực hiện cũng cùng với anh Đích và với Sophie ở khu công nghiệp Synergies Long Thành Đồng Nai ấy, thì chúng ta cũng thể thấy là một số các cái cơ hội thì cũng có thể triển khai được ở như Deepsea, bởi vì qua nhìn nhận một số khách hàng và các doanh nghiệp ở Deepsea thì chúng ta thấy được một số các cái ví dụ tương tự, chẳng hạn như là những các cái ví dụ về chia sẻ cái nguồn mà sử dụng hơi với nhau ấy. Ví dụ chẳng hạn như ở chỗ khu công nghiệp ở Long Thành Đồng Nai thì có một cái cụm công nghiệp là cái cụm đó nằm trong khu công nghiệp, thì cái cụm đó là cái gọi là cái cụm dệt nhuộm. Thì các doanh nghiệp, mỗi một doanh nghiệp dệt nhuộm thì lại sử dụng một cái nồi hơi khác nhau và sử dụng các công nghệ khác nhau, và họ rất là mất cái nhiều nguồn lực, nguồn tài nguyên để mà vận hành cái nồi hơi đó, cũng như là hàng tháng lại phải báo cáo kết quả môi trường để cho ban quản lý khu công nghiệp và cơ quan quản lý môi trường địa phương. Thế thì sau đó thì chúng tôi có đề xuất là thế thì có cách nào đó mà có thể là sử dụng một cái khu sản xuất hơi chung và sau đó thì cấp hơi cho các doanh nghiệp tương tự như vậy hay không? Thế thì sau khi mà chúng tôi đề xuất cái cơ hội đó và cũng nhận được cái sự đồng tình rất là lớn của ban quản lý khu công nghiệp của Synergies cũng như là các doanh nghiệp, và đưa ra các cái nghiên cứu khả thi. Thế thì các cái nghiên cứu khả thi sau đó thì cho ra một cái kết quả rất là tốt, kể cả về giảm được rất là nhiều về nguồn lực, bởi vì chúng ta chỉ có một cái cơ quan chuyên môn quản lý cái hệ thống hơi đó thôi, và những cái này các doanh nghiệp thì không phải quan tâm đến việc đó. Và cái thứ hai là cái giảm được cái tác động môi trường rất là lớn, bởi vì thay vì chúng ta làm cái hệ tập trung centralized, nó sẽ tốt hơn nhiều so với các hệ sẽ decentralized. Và cái thứ ba nữa là họ chuyên môn hóa được cái hệ thống quản lý hơi đó, và sau khi mà đề xuất cái giải pháp đó thì bản thân cái cơ quan quản lý hạ tầng đó thì là tự nhận là họ sẽ đứng ra, họ xin phép và họ xây dựng cái giải pháp này, và nhận được cái sự đồng tình rất là lớn của các doanh nghiệp ở trong cái cụm công nghiệp đó, và các doanh nghiệp sản xuất nhuộm, dệt nhuộm đó thì cam kết mua lại cái toàn bộ cái hơi của đơn vị mà sản xuất hơi. Thì sau khi đánh giá về chi tiết về kinh tế, về môi trường, về xã hội thì chúng tôi nhận thấy là có thể giảm thiểu được về khía cạnh môi trường ấy, thì giảm thiểu được ít nhất là 30% các cái tác động môi trường trong cái việc mà sản xuất hơi tập trung. Thì đấy là một trong những cái ví dụ. Hoặc là một cái ví dụ thứ hai nữa là cũng có thể áp dụng được là cái ví dụ về sử dụng cái khí đồng hành, tức là ban quản lý hạ tầng của khu công nghiệp thì có thể xây dựng một cái hệ cung cấp khí đồng hành tập trung về một chỗ, sau đấy thì sẽ cung cấp cho các doanh nghiệp mong muốn, thay vì là các doanh nghiệp tự mua cái khí đồng hành đấy về trong doanh nghiệp của mình, vừa tốn diện tích rồi là vừa phải có xây dựng các hệ thống về an toàn phòng chống cháy nổ vân vân. Thế thì đấy là một trong những các cái ví dụ mà chúng tôi thấy được là ở các cái doanh nghiệp khu công nghiệp tương tự cũng có thể áp dụng được.
Tôi xin có một chút ý kiến này. Về các doanh nghiệp chung ấy, thì thế là có thể sử dụng chung những cái gọi là dịch vụ hỗ trợ. Có thể là mỗi các đơn vị hạ tầng thì luôn luôn phải chăm sóc cảnh quan của trong khu công nghiệp nói chung, thì hoàn toàn có thể cung cấp các dịch vụ chăm sóc vườn hoa cây cảnh cho các công ty, thay vì các công ty lại phải thuê các đơn vị khác nhau hoặc là tự phải chăm sóc vườn hoa cây cảnh của mình. Một cái khác cũng có thể là áp dụng đấy là dịch vụ bảo trì hàng năm thì có thể sử dụng chung một đơn vị bảo trì thiết bị định kỳ, hoặc là dịch vụ sửa chữa thiết bị sử dụng chung. Thì như vậy là chỉ một đơn vị họ sẽ có đầy đủ trang thiết bị và đỡ phải mỗi một nhà máy lại phải có một đội cơ điện riêng. Hoặc là những dịch vụ kiểm toán năng lượng sử dụng chung trong khu công nghiệp. Mục đích kiểm toán năng lượng hàng năm đấy thì không phải là để đáp ứng theo yêu cầu luật định, mà là giúp các doanh nghiệp là các công ty thì thường có những cái phải có xe đưa đón công nhân, thì hoàn toàn có thể là kết hợp với bên dịch vụ vận tải công cộng để mà ký hợp đồng đưa đón công nhân của các doanh nghiệp của mình, thì chúng ta tránh được cái đoạn mà các công ty lại phải có những xe vận tải xe chở công nhân riêng. Một số cái ý tưởng mà tôi nghĩ là có thể áp dụng chung tất cả, không cứ về Deepsea mà các khu nghiệp đều có thể áp dụng với chung được với nhau. Vâng, xin hết ý kiến.
Vâng, thì tôi ở đây tôi cũng thấy có một ý kiến và chính là cái cũng của anh Harry Phạm ấy, thì cũng chắc là anh cũng làm việc ở Deepsea, thì chúng ta thấy là cái ý kiến của anh Harry Phạm cũng rất là hay, và cái này cũng là trùng cái ý tưởng đối với chúng tôi, là về cái giải pháp về tuần hoàn nước, cũng như là các cái giải pháp mà liên quan đến tái sử dụng, rồi là cung cấp các cái hệ ga cung cấp nitơ hoặc oxy cho các cái doanh nghiệp khác. Đấy, thế thì cái này thì hoàn toàn là chúng tôi rất là ủng hộ những các cái ý tưởng này, và chúng tôi cũng hy vọng là trong cái thời gian tới, khi mà hết dịch Covid và chúng tôi sẽ xuống gặp được trực tiếp các cái anh chị ở trong ban quản lý khu công nghiệp cũng như là các anh chị ở doanh nghiệp, thì chúng ta sẽ có những các cái ý tưởng cũng như là đưa ra những các cái nghiên cứu khả thi hơn. Dựa trên đó thì chúng ta sẽ sàng lọc và xây dựng các cái mô hình trình diễn.
Thank you. So what is excellent to see that people actually started to raise the ideas for synergy opportunities, and of course there's need for further work to prioritize them. But I think a key next step maybe from this workshop is to organize a workshop. Now everybody's up to date on practical examples, what it means industrial synergies, to actually have an opportunity identification and prioritization workshop. And yes, this can be done in the classroom in the best case, but depending on how COVID-19 develops over time, we did it in South Africa, also these opportunity identification workshops online as well. So it's depending on how long the COVID-19 situation takes, there are also different options to do it, this session as well online. With this, I'm looking at the clock. Shall we move to the next session? Are there any other important questions? Shall I close this presentation? Yes. So let me actually get myself. And the next session, we will do a bit quicker. And I just focus on the main items. Let me. So, did I open the right file? Yes, I did. The next session, which I will do in a short format, is about EIP management and added value park management services. And as part of this session, we can also have a more interactive discussion what type of services could be of interest. I have a checklist included in the end, which we can then also go through, but also as part of the previous session, we already discussed some of these services in any case. But the key reason this module is in that in many industrial parks, of course, park management provides traditional services to tenant companies in terms of leasing, selling the land, electricity and water billing, maintenance of the roads, office buildings, and basic security services. And the key international learning is that there are many more things that can be done in terms of these collaborations between park management and the tenant companies and other stakeholders. And we will illustrate this with a couple of examples. Let me skip this one. So why park management is important, I will be brief here. And if you look at all the successful examples around the world, park management shows a very strong leadership and commitment to the sustainable development goals, for example, as also shown by Melissa. But also another success factor for park management is also when you apply eco-industrial park approaches, it creates benefits, economic, environmental, and social. There's a key opportunity for park management to proactively market the added value features to the tenant companies, as clearly demonstrated by the Kwinana examples as well. By providing these added value services, the park becomes even more competitive and attractive for new tenant companies, and also it helps the existing tenant companies. And this proactive facilitation of stakeholder processes is a key role for park management, and also have an effective model to share and recover park level costs and benefits. For example, if you have a shared service, if there's a cost to it, how do you share it? There must be a feasible model underpinning it to making sure it's self-sustainable, because the money must come from somewhere, right? So it's also about, like, say, what kind of services is there a demand from the companies, and for which one is there a business model to recover the cost one way or another. Common challenges, this trade-off between quick industrial development and the environment, but also lack of understanding that environmental and social risks are business risks. But let me move on. Very briefly in here, if you look at around the world, there are different management models for industrial parks. There's no right or wrong. Like, say, some park management is driven by the private sector, like Deepsea. Other industrial parks is driven by a government agency. This is the case in South Africa, for example, as well, or public-private partnerships. And then, as the Kwinana example showed, is association of tenant companies, and also some other parks are run by real estates. But the key message is, whatever the park management model is, each industrial park should be operating self-sustainably, not depending on subsidies, and really with this customer-driven mindset and applying business-driven approach. So in terms of park management services, is to say, well, what kind of service do the tenant companies need? And actually, how can we actually make it happen and recover the cost? This graph shows a typical flowchart or organizational chart of a park management structure. I don't need to go into details in here, because also Deepsea is already a very advanced example. But you see the key functions in here in terms of maintenance, ICT, marketing, and environmental compliance. I just want to highlight a couple of points from an eco-industrial park perspective. As highlighted also by the examples from Ankit in terms of Internet of Things. In terms of ICT, it's of critical importance that actually all the tenant companies, they have, like, say, good access to fast speed internet, because this enables this Internet of Things as well. For the marketing and communication management, this is a big opportunity that this person understands the ERP concept and actually how it adds value to the tenant companies and local community and the government, and then market and communicate this to the stakeholders. This is a key role for the communication managers to have this understanding of the eco-industrial park approach. One other thing is actually here on the right. There's in many industrial parks, including in Kwinana, which I show an example, there's a big opportunity to establish these committees where companies come together on a regular basis to address common challenges and common opportunities, whether or not it's waste recycling, it's health and safety, energy supply, because this is a low cost option to organize, but actually by bringing these companies together on a regular basis, it's a very powerful instrument actually to drive change and work, for example, with these champions within the tenant companies and to share learnings. That's what I would like to highlight. Yeah. In terms of sources of revenue, I just want to highlight one example from the chemical park. This is a park in Germany. If you look at the revenue streams, actually more than 50% of their revenue streams comes from energy-related businesses. So actually, this park manager actually really helps companies actually to supply different types of energy, but also in terms of energy recovery as well. So this shows also they provide waste management services based on the needs of the companies, which then is responsible for 10% of the revenue streams. And then also training and education as well. And of course, each industrial park is unique. So also the types of revenue shares will be different for each industrial park. And if there's time, like say, Melissa, does this graph, does it look similar for Deepsea in terms of potential revenue streams for park management, or is it a different business model, or is it also energy supply is a part of your business model? Or we can also leave this question.
I cannot directly give an answer on this one. Yeah, I should further investigate on making another graph so I can compare with this one.
Okay, yeah. Thank you, Melissa. And the main message from this slide is actually by applying added value services, there's an opportunity to provide additional added value services to the tenant companies, but then also self-sustain and expand the park management services as well. It makes business sense for everybody. Then I would like to actually come to the main thing, like say, give some practical examples of industrial parks and the added value services, and then have a bit of a discussion on what kind of use of a checklist, what are the opportunities for Deepsea. But before, so Eco Plus, it's a park management agency in Austria. They manage about 17 industrial parks, as well as 4 technology parks. And yes, they provide the basic park management services to the tenant companies, but in addition, they help the tenant companies in many different aspects as well, based on their needs. For example, they provide customized rental properties. So for example, a small and medium-sized enterprise, they could locate to the park, rent it for a couple of years, and then as they expand, they can actually then move easily into a different building, office. They also actually help the tenant companies actually to support in their applications for funding and subsidies as well, because this is sometimes a bit of a complicated process, and park management actually then offers this as a service. But they also actually help their tenant companies in terms of dealing with the authorities in terms of operating permits and trade licenses. Of course, the responsibility of compliance remains always with the tenant companies, but they help in terms of facilitating this process with the government agencies. And also, they have a network with existing universities in Austria, where actually then they link it in with specific industry sectors operating in their industrial parks. You can think about Industry 4.0 or research being undertaken on metal processing. So actually they again act as this facilitator between research institutions and then the tenant company, so they can actually benefit from each other in terms of developing new products as well. And they also have an industry network where actually they get the industries together on a regular basis and establish these formal linkages between, and that this is so evident in Quidana, but also in the Kallenberg example. It should not be underestimated to create these personal linkages, because then companies, they start to know each other, they start to exchange their ideas, their challenges and opportunities, and they start helping each other because, yeah. Let's move on. some pictures here, but maybe for this slide in here, the Eco Plus, for example, they also operate a kindergarten, a childcare facility, and then located just outside of one of the industrial parks. And there's a business model for it because in Austria it's very important to, well, in any country, to making sure that technical staff actually remains working within the tenant company. So they actually have a system in place where actually then the workers, they can drop off their kids before they go to work in this kindergarten, and actually then they can pick them up when they leave again. Again, it's based on the needs of the company workers that it was established. So the park management actually coordinates these efforts. We did, as part of our previous projects, funded by the Global Environmental Facility, GEIPP, we also visited Eco Plus as part of a Vietnamese delegation, including also representatives of MPI and the industrial park authorities in Vietnam, and also the Vice Minister for the Ministry of Planning and Investment, to get first-hand learning from this industrial park. Not going through all the bullet points. Again, Eco Plus, a key message learning was also park management. They have a strong engagement role, so they can really actually reach out proactively to the companies, governments, and community. This is critical. The business model: industrial land is sold or rented out, and the companies, they pay annual fee for utility infrastructures and services that they need. So they have actually a sustainable business model actually to sustain these services. And they also do an annual questionnaire, for example, in terms of with the tenant companies and the workers. What services do you need? How can we help you better? How can we further improve these services? And again, same as Melissa said also earlier, Eco-Industrial Park is not an end goal, it's a process of continuous improvement, and this is also what Eco Plus is also doing. This is one example. The other example, I would maybe refer again to Kwinana, and maybe let's skip this slide, but this one here. The Kwinana Industry Council, they run a number of committees focusing on specific topics which are of interest to the industrial park and the tenant companies. So it's basically a group of maybe 8 companies which come together on a monthly basis I'll give a few topics on mutual aid, Kwinana mutual aid. So a number of industries in Kwinana, they have their own emergency response system. So actually in Kwinana, they actually set up a system where also they start sharing their emergency response system. Of course, the advantage is that the emergency response system gets more effective, because if there's a fire or oil leak or whatever it is in one company, the other companies in Kwinana, they actually come to help. So it's a better use. And it's also a cost-effective way to share these services. Why would all the companies have all fire trucks, etc.? It's very costly. So again, sharing these services. Another one, they have also a workforce education committee, is actually to making sure that there is a sustained supply of skilled workers to service the industry. So they assess what kind of skills do the tenant companies need, because this is changing all the time as well. And actually, can we actually get the workers from the local municipalities rather than from far away? This is not always the case. So actually, they have a very active program. Actually, they work together with local schools and with technical schools actually to say, well, actually, we need these skills. How can we work together? These are low-cost options, but it requires leaderships and proactiveness to make it happen. So these are some of the examples. Again, I can talk for hours about these examples, but I just want to give you a flavor of these committees. And also maybe highlight again, maybe this Community and Industries Forum. This is held, they changed it actually, it's every 3 to 4 months. This is actually a very powerful instrument. And also to facilitate these synergies as well, they organize these workshops to identify the opportunities. And this is also how this water recycling facility in Kwinana was established as well, because it's a real result of this facilitating role. Very briefly, another example is from Germany, is Industrial Park Höchst. As shown on the previous slide, energy services is actually a key revenue stream for them. And actually this slide actually showed the type of energy and utility services that they provide. So power, of course, electricity, but also heat and steam they take care of. Like say a shared steam supplying system. It's a more efficient way of doing it. And it releases the burden on each company actually to have their own boilers in place. But also cooling. They provide cooling systems as well. Again, it just shows that within even energy and utilities, there are a range of services that are possible. Again, each industrial park is unique. Of course, Industry Park Höchst is not Deepsea in terms of its development and the types of industry. So it's very much a need for customized approaches. Oops, sorry. And then also in terms of environmental services, it actually highlights also the services which are being offered in Industrial Park Höchst in terms of helping them with purpose, facilitating water pollution control, resource efficiency assessments, noise control, and waste management as well. There are a range of services in here. With this slide, I want to make you aware, like say, as we have these trainings in different countries, we recognize the need for industrial parks to work on this. There's always a great opportunity. And to facilitate in this process, UNIDO is developing this park management services tool, which really helps park management and the tenant companies to review, prioritize, and also do the action planning for added value services for their industrial park. Again, each industrial park is unique, so the services that are relevant for Kwinana may not be relevant to Deepsea and vice versa. So this is very much a customized approach. The tool is not yet online, but it will be online by the end of this year. And perhaps if there's an interest, this could also be further applied within Deepsea to see what kind of services are possible. What I would like to show on the next slides, and let me actually share in the chat box the English version for Melissa. Bear with me. And maybe Ankit, may I ask you to help me here? Ankit, if you go to the Dropbox,
yeah,
the training materials, and then there's a subfolder interactive exercises.
Yeah.
And there's a PowerPoint file with park management added value services checklist. Okay. Could you share this checklist in the chat box just for Melissa? Then she has the English version as well. Okay, good, thank you. So this checklist is basically a long list of park management services based on international experiences, categorized by different topics. And it's 4 pages. And I'm not going through each of them because this will be quite a laborious, intensive exercise, but I will highlight a few of those. And the structure of this checklist is actually here. You can see the topic. Let's say procurement, facilitate joint industry buying of raw and processed material. Maybe if there's a common need to purchase cardboard, can the industrial park get a better price for common needs materials if it's doing jointly? I'm not saying this is applicable to Deepsea. That will be a discussion. And this is the purpose of this discussion here. What is the potential for the industrial park? Yes, no, and what is the possible business model for this? And by going through this checklist, the experience is that maybe 70% is not applicable. This is totally fine. But by using this checklist, if we can come up with 5 additional park management services for where there's a potential to further explore it, I think that's already a good outcome, right? But just having this discussion, go through the checklist, or can already identify some services which, I haven't actually thought about. Why not do it? It makes sense, or let's investigate it further. So this is the intention of this checklist. Does it make sense? Yeah. I will give a few examples later on, but I just want to explain the purpose of this checklist. Let me pick out a few other examples. Melissa, will you able to open the checklist, the English version, in the chat box? And other people who cannot read Vietnamese. Do you see the file in the chat box? Okay, share.
Yes, I'm opening it.
Okay, good. In the meantime, let me give you some additional examples. And this was also mentioned in the previous session as well, because in terms of transportation, like say facilitate shared transport systems among the tenant companies. If there's a common need to transport to a certain region, what can be done there? Does it make sense? The next one, common vehicle maintenance. Actually, this is actually from one of the work that we've done with the park in South Africa. Common vehicle maintenance services in industrial park, because there each of the companies that their own vehicle maintenance system in place, but it was more cost effective and efficient if this is actually done jointly. For human resources, rather than each tenant companies organize their own trainings on particular topics, it could be anything, occupational health and safety, chemical processing. What are the common training needs of the companies in the industrial park? And can we do something together there? Another example, in terms of monitoring and management systems, maybe here to refer to example from Kwinana, is there, let's say, rather than each company doing their own monitoring, is there also a need, can we do something jointly around the boundaries of Deepsea, as was done also by the Kwinana industries? This could be another opportunity. Security, operate a common security control and response system in industrial park. This was also a key opportunity in Nigeria, Ankit, where each of the tenant companies had their own security system, but but can it be more effective, cost effective, if you actually have to facilitate a common security services? This is just slide one. I'm not going through all examples, but hopefully by giving these examples, you get a flavor, right? Slide number 2. It covers the community, community engagement on behalf of all the tenant companies as being done in Kwinana. That's a service as well, right? In terms of R&D, coordinate engagement between universities in Vietnam or even internationally and some of the deep sea companies. Is there any potential in terms of, for the chemical sector, for example, maybe there are some universities which are very active and maybe there are some synergies in terms of, access to finance, help tenant companies to actually how to connect with relevant financial institutions in Vietnam, as EcoPlus is also doing. Oops. The third one, this is the last one with detailed information. These industry committees, again, I mentioned it a couple of times before, but this is a very powerful low-cost option to actually get industries together on a regular basis to address common challenges and opportunities, whatever they may be. I highlighted the ones for Kwinana. They may well be different for Deepsea, but this is a service as well. For waste, and this is also linked to the example that Melissa mentioned in terms of the plastic recycling. Can we do something together in terms of improving on this? Energy, coordinate a program to improve the energy efficiency with tenant companies. Can we actually make connections to expert organizations like the VNCPC and do these energy efficiency assessment with tenant companies? And last but not least, also facilitate this engagement with the tenant companies on industrial synergies. And of course, part of this checklist, when you go through this checklist, always tenant companies and park management, they come up with different ideas which you can then capture in here. So the previous 3 slides are not all inclusive, it's just what we know so far. So this is the checklist, and any remaining time before I hand over to Ting and his team to close this training, given on these 3 slides, 1, 2, 3. Is there anything that immediately, like say, stood out for you in terms of park management service? Okay, well, actually, why not look into this? We don't have to make a decision on implementation. We just want to, let's say, where is there an interest and potential? And we already discussed a few of them in the previous session in terms of joint logistics, energy audits, but maybe can I open the floor to seek some feedback from Deepsea and the tenant companies? Or even say, well, this is totally not a valuable service because of this and this reason, also fine. We just want to get some reflections. Any from the tenant companies, like say, is there any service that you think you could benefit from it as well? You can put it in the chat box or raise your hand. There's translation available. It's just an open discussion. And may I pick on you one more time, Melissa, like say, when you go through the checklist, maybe reflect on maybe some service that could be useful, or maybe some service like this is not applicable to Deepsea because in this and this. Or do you see any value in this checklist?
Yeah, well, the checklist was very valuable. Actually, it made me realize that we do more industrial symbiosis than we thought. I had none of my list until today. What I now already have on my list is we have a petrochemical zone. This zone is a separate. It's part of Dinvu, but it's like a separate area for the petrochemical companies. For these companies, we have a response plan. We also have a firefighting team of Deepsea that is 24/7 available. We organize job fairs for all companies who want to join within the Deepsea. We do have, like Ankit said before, we do have the Internet of Things for the electrical meters. We do have our own electrical grids, which is also an advantage for our customers. We also have a bus service on which customers can subscribe. So today was for me personally a very interesting session because it made me think. It made me realize what we already do. It also gave a lot of insight in the opportunities we have. I think we have many opportunities ahead, and I cannot repeat it more. We need input from our tenants. This is crucial to, if Deepsea has potential and a will to participate in this and to coordinate between our customers, but they need to give us input.
Yeah. And a very important point, because Deepsea is an advanced industrial park, and sometimes you provide these services even without knowing this is already industrial synergy, right? So industrial symbiosis, industrial synergies is a process of continuous improvement, like say, and it never stops. Like say, even you make the next steps, and then the needs of companies are changing all the time, or as tenant companies come forward with ideas, and oh, actually, in 3 years' time, I haven't thought about this. Can we make it happen? Does it make sense? Is there a business case? And in some cases, it may well be a need from a particular company. You think there's a business case, but when you talk to other companies, it doesn't happen. But that's part of the process, right? You just explore, and again, collaboration and communication between the tenant companies and the park management, and it's key. Just to get out of our silos. In each company, you are of course a separate entity, but you are part of the wider deep zone industrial park, and even deep zone, Deepsea. You're not operating in isolation. You're also dependent on your municipality in terms of your workforce, the community. You're not operating in isolation either. There are also maybe synergy between the different industrial zones as well. So really this out of the box thinking, and maybe in some cases getting out of our comfort zone as well, because we may not all be used to talking outside of our companies or outside of an industrial park. This is also step by step we must for moving forward. So I think today's session was very helpful, like to understand, you know, the services and synergies that are already happening. And I think, you know, showing some ways in terms of moving forward, in terms of what can be done. And again, everything that you learned today and yesterday are business opportunities with benefits one way or another. It makes business sense. That's here. With this, I look at the clock. We have 50 minutes left as part of this training. Are there any other services that could be of interest from Ting or from the other 10 companies that you feel strongly about we haven't discussed yet? And normally what we do with this, today we are just introducing this checklist. What we normally do that we actually have a separate session with park management and the 10 companies where we go one by one in a classroom setting through these services and then do it systematically. But this is then a dedicated separate session. So, but at least with today's session, you become aware of what could be done and what the approach is. And Ting, is anything else to add from your side in terms of park management services?
Chúng ta coi trong cái chat box ấy thì chúng ta còn một câu hỏi nữa, thì tôi nghĩ là cái câu hỏi này cũng rất là hay, liên quan đến cái bài trình bày của ông Đích ấy, tức là câu hỏi là liên quan đến cái khu công nghiệp và Nana này thì đã được là chứng nhận là khu công nghiệp sinh thái, thì là vậy thì nếu mà khu công nghiệp sinh thái ở Việt Nam thì cái cơ chế hoặc là cái cách thức chứng nhận nó như thế nào, thì xin ông chia sẻ thêm.
Yeah, very good question actually to end. So all the synergies and park management services and the resource efficiencies that Kwinana is doing, it doesn't necessarily do it under the header of eco-industrial park terminology. All these opportunities are driven by park management and the tenant companies themselves because they make business sense. It's not actually that the government in Western Australia is actually pushing for this topic. No. And this is also the unique or the added value story of eco-industrial park. What's most important that industrial zones, parks apply the concepts and the tools of eco-industrial park approach. Whether or not you promote it as eco-industrial park, some countries do it, as in Vietnam, but in Australia, as you saw from the homepage of the Kwinana Industry Council, what they do, they promote the industrial synergies as a way to demonstrate their competitive advantage. And also they promote it under the header of community, environment, and sustainability. But if whatever works, whatever gains momentum, but all the opportunities which have been implemented in Kwinana are not driven by the government, they are driven by park management and the tenant companies themselves because they make business sense. And if you would speak to Chris Orton, the director of park management, he would even argue in some cases that government is rather actually a barrier in terms of this topic rather than an enabler, as in terms of these reuse of these large volume industrial byproducts. So also with the international framework, if it's not like if companies apply with the international EIP framework, you don't get a certificate from UNIDO or something. Again, it's a business-driven approach. What are the opportunities? What can we do to create economic, environmental, and social benefits? And how can we promote this in whatever format to our existing tenants, new investors, the community, and the government? Hopefully that answers your question. Ankit, is anything I missed or in this response?
I think that adequately covers it, Dick. Absolutely.
But very good question. With this, anything more questions before I hand over to the cleaner production team, to round off the training and to discuss the next steps. Maybe I stop sharing my, because also there's a presentation from Alexandra on the next steps as well. And maybe I will stop sharing and then hand over to the team at Cleaner Production Center and Alexandro for the closing and next steps. But thank you very much from our side. It was a pleasure to have you today.
Absolutely, thank you all.
Và xin được cảm ơn ông Đích và ông Ankit những các cái chia sẻ về kinh nghiệm quốc tế cũng như một số các cái ví dụ thực tiễn ở Việt Nam rất là hữu ích cho cái việc mà chúng ta sẽ thực hiện sau này. Thế thì xin phép là sẽ xin được chia sẻ với các quý vị, các anh chị, các doanh nghiệp và khu công nghiệp ở Deepsea về kế hoạch triển khai sắp tới của dự án. Thì cái hoạt động này thì thực hiện chung giữa là chúng ta thực hiện có hai khu, là khu công nghiệp Deepsea và khu công nghiệp Amata. Tuy nhiên là khu công nghiệp Amata thì tình hình hiện nay là đang bị dịch Covid rất là nghiêm trọng, cho nên là chúng tôi cũng không thực hiện được cái việc khởi động cũng như đào tạo ở khu công nghiệp Amata. Và chúng tôi cũng hy vọng là trong thời gian tới thì sau cái bước đào tạo này cho khu công nghiệp Deepsea thì chúng tôi có thể xuống và gặp gỡ trực tiếp các doanh nghiệp và đánh giá trực tiếp cái sử dụng hiệu quả tài nguyên, sản xuất sạch hơn cũng như là cộng sinh công nghiệp cho các doanh nghiệp. Sau cái buổi đào tạo này thì trong thời gian tới thì chúng tôi sẽ thực hiện đánh giá nhanh về sử dụng hiệu quả tài nguyên, sản xuất sạch hơn cho các doanh nghiệp được lựa chọn, và dự kiến thì chúng tôi cũng sẽ lựa chọn khoảng 20 doanh nghiệp trong khu công nghiệp Deepsea để đánh giá. Và cái đánh giá đó là gì? Như cái bài trình bày hôm qua các quý vị đã nghe, tức là của anh Đinh Mạnh Thắng đó, thì chúng tôi sẽ có những cái thiết bị đo đạc, phân tích các liên quan đến sử dụng về mặt năng lượng, nhất là phần điện, rồi là sử dụng nước, kiểm kê các cái chất thải, và có những các cái ghi chép, và sau đó thì chúng tôi sẽ đưa ra những các giải pháp để cho doanh nghiệp thực hiện ngay tại chỗ, có thể mang lại hiệu quả ngay lập tức, hoặc đưa ra những các giải pháp mang tính chất lâu dài. Có thể chia ra hai cái loại hình giải pháp. Cái loại hình giải pháp thứ nhất là cái giải pháp mà có thực hiện ngay và mang lại có chi phí thực hiện ấy, rất là thấp, hoặc là hầu như là không mất chi phí nhưng lại mang lại hiệu quả ngay lập tức, hoặc là có những cái chi phí cao thì cần phải có những các cái nghiên cứu khả thi chi tiết. Thì sau đó thì chúng tôi cũng có những các cái báo cáo cụ thể, có những cái lộ trình để gửi các doanh nghiệp để thực hiện. Sau cái bước đó thì chúng tôi sẽ có cái hoạt động tiếp theo, tức là cái hoạt động về xác định các giải pháp về cộng sinh công nghiệp cho các cái doanh nghiệp này. Có các cái loại hình cộng sinh khác nhau, tức là có thể loại hình cộng sinh giữa các doanh nghiệp với các doanh nghiệp, giữa các doanh nghiệp với khu công nghiệp, và thậm chí có cả cái loại hình cộng sinh giữa khu công nghiệp và với đô thị. Thì chúng tôi cũng phải có những các cái nghiên cứu, thu thập thông tin và phân tích. Hoạt động tiếp theo nữa thì dựa trên những các cái đánh giá như vậy thì thu thập thông tin thì sẽ có những các chuyên gia kinh tế sẽ nghiên cứu các cái giải pháp khả thi để cho các doanh nghiệp có lộ trình thực hiện và xây dựng được các cái dự án, hoặc là những các cái cơ hội mà có thể tiếp cận được với các nguồn tài chính, như các cái quỹ xanh ở Việt Nam để có thể vay vốn hoặc là có hỗ trợ tài chính để thực hiện những các cái giải pháp này. Bên cạnh đó thì chúng ta thấy là có một trong những cái quá trình thực hiện thì như các quý vị cũng đã trình bày đó, thì chúng ta thấy hiện nay về mặt luật pháp, về mặt các cái rào cản, các cái cản trở còn ở trong các cái nghị định, các cái thông tư rất nhiều liên quan đến cái phần về cộng sinh công nghiệp, cũng như là liên quan đến thực hiện cái khu công nghiệp sinh thái. Ví dụ như chẳng hạn như là chúng ta thấy là cái phần mà chúng ta mong muốn, các doanh nghiệp rất là mong muốn là chúng ta có thể tuần hoàn nước hoặc là tái sử dụng nước để cho thực hiện các cái mục đích khác nhau như tưới cây, hoặc là tái sử dụng lại. Tuy nhiên thì ở đâu đó thì trong các cái thông tư, các cái nghị định vẫn còn chưa thuận lợi cho các doanh nghiệp thực hiện. Để chính vì vậy cho nên là trong cái hợp phần của cái dự án này thì có một phần, tức là sẽ có chuyên gia về mặt chính sách sẽ xuống làm việc với các doanh nghiệp để mà tìm hiểu về các cái rào cản về mặt pháp lý. Như vậy thì trên cơ sở đó thì chuyên gia sẽ tập hợp lại và sẽ đưa ra một cái đề xuất về các cái cơ chế tài chính để trình lên Bộ Kế hoạch Đầu tư. Và chúng tôi cũng được biết là Bộ Kế hoạch Đầu tư thì cũng sẽ có những các cái bước tiếp theo đó, sẽ làm việc với các cái bộ ngành liên quan. Ví dụ chẳng hạn như là chất thải đô thị thì lại liên quan đến Bộ Xây dựng, hoặc là nước thải mà liên quan đến tưới cây thì lại liên quan đến Bộ Nông nghiệp, vân vân. Thì nó cũng có các bộ ngành liên quan khác nhau. Thì Bộ Kế hoạch Đầu tư sẽ làm việc cùng với lại các bộ liên quan như Bộ Tài nguyên Môi trường, Bộ Xây dựng, Bộ Nông nghiệp và Phát triển Nông thôn. Rồi cũng có một cái hoạt động nữa là sau khi mà là thực hiện tại các doanh nghiệp thì chúng tôi cũng sẽ đo đạc lại những cái kết quả mà các doanh nghiệp đã thực hiện, và trên cơ sở đó thì chúng tôi sẽ tổ chức một cái buổi hội thảo để mà đưa ra được những các cái ví dụ hoặc những kết quả mà đã thực hiện, để các doanh nghiệp có thể trên cơ sở đó nhân rộng được các cái mô hình này ở trong các cái bản thân các doanh nghiệp trong khu công nghiệp Đình Vũ, hoặc là thậm chí ở các cái khu công nghiệp khác nhau ở trên địa bàn thành phố Hải Phòng hoặc là các khu lân cận. Thì đấy là mục đích của cái hợp phần này. Cái hợp phần này thì chúng tôi dự kiến thực hiện trong 14 tháng và sẽ nếu mọi việc diễn ra suôn sẻ thì sẽ kết thúc vào dự kiến vào tháng 6 năm 2022. Và cũng hy vọng là trong thời gian tới tình hình dịch Covid lắng xuống thì chúng tôi sẽ có cơ hội làm việc rất là chi tiết cụ thể với các doanh nghiệp. Và cũng xin được nhấn mạnh lại là cái buổi đào tạo ngày hôm nay thì chúng tôi cũng cung cấp một cái lượng thông tin nhất định cho các doanh nghiệp. Nhưng mà sau đó thì khi mà làm việc trực tiếp lựa chọn đánh giá tại 20 cái doanh nghiệp khu công nghiệp Deepsea ấy, thì chúng tôi sẽ có một cái buổi giới thiệu lại hoặc là hướng dẫn cụ thể chi tiết cho cán bộ kỹ thuật tại 20 cái doanh nghiệp này. Và cũng trên cơ sở đó thì 20 cán bộ kỹ thuật này sẽ chính là những người nòng cốt để mà thực hiện duy trì những cái hoạt động. Bởi vì sản xuất sạch hơn, rồi sử dụng hiệu quả tài nguyên cũng như cộng sinh công nghiệp thì phải là một công việc mà phải liên tục duy trì, lặp đi lặp lại hàng ngày và luôn luôn cải tiến thì mới đạt được hiệu quả như mong muốn. Đó là những cái bước tiếp theo mà chúng tôi dự kiến thực hiện ở chỗ khu công nghiệp Deepsea. Như vậy thì cũng mong là các anh chị sẽ có câu hỏi gì thì xin cho ý kiến, hoặc là nếu như là các anh chị muốn cần thông tin thêm thì liên hệ với lại phía ban tổ chức thì chúng tôi sẽ sẵn sàng cung cấp tất cả những các cái thông tin liên quan đến hợp phần của dự án. Xin cảm ơn. Nếu các quý vị mà không có câu hỏi gì, hoặc là các quý vị có câu hỏi sau thì có thể gửi vào trong chat box thì chúng tôi sẵn sàng trả lời. Thì còn một ít phút nữa thì chúng tôi xin phép được chuyển sang cái phần cũng rất là quan trọng, là cái phần về có một số các cái lưu ý tóm tắt phải trình bày của ông Alexandro, quản lý chương trình ở tại Tổ chức Phát triển Công nghiệp Liên Hợp Quốc trụ hội sở tại Cộng hòa Áo. Xin mời ông Alexandro.
Yes, good morning and good afternoon. I really would like to congratulate, all of us to making it until now. I know, we were really flooded with information, and since this event was completely virtual, I think it's even more tiring than a physical event. So really congratulations to everybody. Congratulations to the organizers, the NCPC and Ankit and Dick and everybody. So I actually prepared a few slides, but maybe I will skip it also because I mean, most part of my points were already mentioned by Mr. Tin. I mean, a couple of take-home messages from my side is that, okay, we say the transformation towards agro-industrial park is a journey. So, I mean, we don't see it as something that you have to check. I mean, we know which direction we are going. Some industrial parks are going quicker than others, but Deepsea, for what we could see until now, it's a very high performance industrial park. And we think and we hope that it will become a model industrial park in Vietnam for the others to follow. We are ready to support you, thanks to the support of the Swiss government and in cooperation with MPI. So we are working, we will work with the companies, park manager, service providers and communities to demonstrate what an agro-industrial park is. And then at the meantime, we'll work on the development of policy and regulations in support to MPI and other involved agencies. So Mr. Tin already explained what will be the next step. So the immediate next step is that we will visit the companies. So probably a team from the NCPC will organize a half-a-day visit to discuss with technical and decision maker personnel what could be done. Then we will help you to implement this, helping you not with equipment but with technical assistance, development of viable business plans, access to funding, and so on. We will also organize a meeting on urban industrial symbiosis with the communities, and also specific events with all the companies to identify the possible industrial symbiosis. In parallel, I mean, beyond the park level, we are working on the implementation of Decree 82 and the development of the regulation on RCP and industrial symbiosis. We are also supporting MPI with the development of a GEIPP index. So basically, one number that could identify where an industrial park stands against the national GEIPP requirements, and also the development of a GEIPP database, where basically at some point the industrial parks will be required to send some very basic information to the government, just for them to track the development over time. And all this work is basically led by MPI, since MPI is the responsible ministry within the government for GEIPP, but in consultation with the other key ministries. So if you have any question, I mean, you can refer to the Deepsea management, so Melissa and Mrs. Lan, or if you have specific questions on the project, you can also refer directly to me or to our MPI colleagues. Thank you very much, and I hope this was useful. And as soon as this COVID situation improves, I think we'll really start, hitting the ground, as we say. Thanks.
Vâng, xin cảm ơn ông Alexandro. Như vậy thì cái buổi đào tạo trực tuyến của chúng ta sau 2 buổi thì hôm nay đến đây cũng là kết thúc. Thay mặt cho ban tổ chức, tôi xin được trân trọng gửi lời cảm ơn tới ông Alexandro, tổ chức phát triển công nghiệp Liên Hợp Quốc, ông Huy ở đại diện nhà tài trợ Seco, các đại diện của ban quản lý ban kinh tế Hải Phòng, ông Bùi Ngọc Hải, ông đại diện cho khu kinh tế khu nghiệp Deepsea Hải Phòng, bà Melisa, chị Lan, chị Hân, các diễn giả ông Đích Văn Bia, ông Ankit Kapasi, cũng như là các quý vị đã dành thời gian để tham dự cái buổi đào tạo trực tuyến với chúng tôi. Mặc dù cái thời gian rất là hạn chế và cái tình hình Covid cũng rất là căng thẳng, nhưng mà cũng các quý vị cũng đã ngồi lắng nghe rất là nghiêm túc trong 2 buổi chiều ngày hôm qua, hôm nay và hôm qua, để cho chúng tôi rất là tri ân, cảm ơn những các cái tấm lòng của các đại biểu, và cũng rất là trân trọng cảm ơn các anh chị trong ban tổ chức đã hỗ trợ thực hiện đường truyền để chúng tôi có thể thực hiện tốt. Các anh chị phiên dịch cũng đã rất là nỗ lực trong cái 2 ngày hôm qua, và xin được thay mặt ban tổ chức xin được gửi lời chào và cảm ơn, và hy vọng gặp lại các quý vị trong thời gian tới. Xin kết thúc cái buổi hội thảo chúng ta ngày hôm nay.